Kitty?
Do you want to do lapel mics? Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We appreciate you being here. I'm improvising on mics. Because now we have to hold the button. So, I'm Noelle Kisher-Lepper. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the city. My department, the Department of Planning and Zoning, is hosting you tonight, and we have invited speakers from the Morton Arboretum to come and give us all an education about the benefit of trees. So I would like to introduce to you Natalie Burgos and Zach Wirtz from the Morton Arboretum. I'll let them introduce themselves in more detail.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay, excellent. Hi, everybody. My name is Zach Wirtz. I am the Chicago Region Trees Initiative Community Manager at the Morton Arboretum. I'm joined by Natalie tonight. We're going to be talking about a number of things. We're going to be talking about Waukegan's urban forest and some urban forest information for across the Chicago region, talking about the benefits of trees and why you may care that they're in your community. And then I'm going to be talking a bit about ordinances and other policy to help us maintain and protect trees that we have. So I'm actually going to turn things over to Natalie first, who's going to be talking about some urban forest statistics and benefits of trees.
Can everyone hear me? I'm not sure if this mic. You both need a microphone. Can you hear me now? Yes. There we go. All right. Sorry if I sound a little out of breath. Even Google Maps is not great at estimating times based off of accidents on the highway, so I was sprinting up the stairs a little bit. All right. Once again, my name is Natalie Burgos. I am the outreach assistant at both the Chicago Region Trees Initiative and the Plant Clinic at the Morton Arboretum. So thank you again for coming. We really appreciate it, and we hope you learned something new. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask us at the end. So to begin with, we are going to look at the general data of not just Waukegan. We're going to look at a larger scale, starting with the Chicago and 7-county region, and then we're going to narrow down to Waukegan so we can get some more specific information. So both in 2010 and in 2020, the Chicago Region Trees Initiative, CRTI for short, they conducted a tree census. And what we found was a variety of statistics that we can later break down by county and even by local areas like Waukegan. So across Chicago and the 7-county region, there are 172.297 million trees, which sounds like a lot, and that's no small number, but over the past 10 years, we've only seen a difference of 21% of our total land cover area rise up to 23%. So even though that's a really big number of trees, it's not the biggest change that we've seen. The next point seems a little confusing, but every year you have the benefits that trees provide. They can be monetized as $416 million annually. But if all of those trees disappeared today and you had to replace them to be able to gain those benefits back in the way that you're receiving them now, it would be $45 billion. So a lot of trees, but even bigger benefits that they provide. And through the 2020 assessment, to give that general number of trees a little more definition, we found that there are 194 different species of trees throughout the area, but only 37% are native to Illinois. And that comes in later as to why it's maybe not the best number that we were hoping for. So to look at a smaller scale, Lake County, from the, oh, sorry, my hair. From those several million trees, we have 44.7 million trees in Lake County alone. And over the 300,000 acres that you've got, that's about 149, 150 trees per acre. Again, no small number, that's actually pretty good. And Lake County has done better than the 7-county area as a whole by having a 30 to 35% increase rather than just 21 to 23%. All right, so this is just a visualization of how trees have increased from 2010 to 2020. As you can see, Lake County done pretty well, pretty high up there. Unfortunately, we have seen some drops in, for example, McHenry County and Chicago, hoping for better, but maybe things will turn around. So well done, Lake County. And now these are the breakdowns in numbers. And again, At the top, we've got our total number of trees, separated from the 7-county region and Chicago. And that's where we got our 172.29 million trees. And that's where the canopy cover that we see is the 23%. Now, as I mentioned, native trees and also tree size is going to play a big factor into the benefits that a tree can provide. So trees that, if you measure a tree at about chest height, you're going to want it to be about 6 inches in diameter for it to really start providing some of those benefits. That's when it's reached an age where it's not just established and content in the space it is, but it's now putting on growth, putting out all of those benefits that are going to be a lot more significant to the area that it's in. And unfortunately, most of the trees, 75%, are less than those 6 inches that we want. So they're just little babies that are out there. Now, this is a lot more numbers, but I highlighted the monetary values because we deal with money a lot more than we deal with metric tons, at least most of us. So that's going to make it a little more feasible for us to wrap our heads around. So now in terms of the pollution removal, so that's the amount that a tree is going to actively take out of the environment, you're going to see that it's 191 million, more than that. Does not, does it? Is this a little bit better? Okay. All right, for carbon storage, again, if we transfer that into a monetary amount, that's already up in the billions. Same with carbon sequestration. Now, a key difference here, carbon storage is carbon that's taken out and stored in the tree itself as part of its cells, part of its system, part of its roots and branches. Carbon sequestration is carbon that's taken out and placed somewhere else in the system. It's transferred into new nutrients, essentially. And both of those, again, we've got $1 billion for carbon storage and in the millions for carbon sequestration. And then oxygen production, not something that we can monetize yet, really, but in tons per year, that's, if my glasses will help me see, almost 650,000 metric tons per year. So that's going to be helping a lot of people breathe, which last I checked is kind of nice. Now, not just those benefits that we get. It's a very hello. There we go. We can try switching. How's this working now? All right. Yeah, we'll hold it like this for a moment. No? Hello? There we go. Let's see how long it lasts. If not, I'll really enunciate. So runoff is also something that we can put into dollar effects simply because if you have a lot of runoff, you're going to have a lot of issues with flooding, et cetera. And monetarily, again, this is in the billions, $99 billion plus per year that trees help reduce in cost to the city, to individuals, et cetera. You've also got building energy savings. So due to shading, due to providing a bit of a temperature buffer, trees also are helping in the billions, again, 32 billion. And then for carbon avoided, simply because we're not needing to do that extra heating, that extra cooling, you've got another $10 billion that are being saved annually. Now that last number is, again, the replacement value. If all of these benefits were suddenly gone because trees were removed, they disappeared, who knows, then it would take over, ooh, is that 44 trillion up there? Am I misreading that? Billion, there we go. Over $44 billion that it would take to replace all the trees to have those benefits that we get annually back. And that would include care, it would include replacement of the tree, it would include maintenance, et cetera. All right, as I mentioned before, when we looked at the tree canopy data, it was only 37%, hello, of species that were native. Now, if you have a garden that you take care of, if you're in any environmental work, you've probably heard of European buckthorn. It's a very aggressive, invasive species, and unfortunately, it makes up 36% of our total canopy. 45% of the species that are invasive, but out of our total canopy, it's already over a third. Using the data that we gathered, we found that over 18 million stems are just buckthorn, and that was in 2010. In 2020, that increased to over 63 million. So it's out there and it is taking charge. This is just a visual representation. So if this is all of our tree canopy, that entire third is just European buckthorn. And then again, just another visualization. If you're not someone who likes pie charts, graphs, you can see that it's way higher. The next highest is probably the green ash or the box elders, and they're just by 5%. All right, so invasive species are not just limited to other plant species. We also have things like the emerald ash borer, and what's coming up recently, the spotted lanternfly. So emerald ash borer, we've already seen the impacts from this. It's a little Asian beetle that came across possibly on people's shoes, luggage, transported goods, etc., and it targeted ash trees. They like to dig into the bark and eat their way. They eat a maze that separates the living tissue from the dead tissue. And unfortunately, that means that nutrients can't flow up and down the tree, which means it doesn't grow, and unfortunately, it dies. And what we calculated in 2020 was that 6.399 million trees were lost to emerald ash borer alone. Broken down by species, we see that even though there was a little bit of a gain for other subspecies of ash and black ash, they are nowhere near enough to outmatch the damage that was done to green ash and white ash specifically. All right, so a little bit of hope, narrowing it down to Waukegan. This is a breakdown of the types of land that we've got here in Waukegan. This was done using overhead maps and estimating what is paved road, what are buildings, what is green vegetation, and what is tree canopy. And so Lake County, their vegetation is 44% compared to their 33% of tree canopy. Waukegan has slightly smaller numbers, with 42% being vegetation and 28% being tree canopy. So this is one of those maps, and all of the maps that you see are available on chicagorti.org. So if you'd like to go look at them in depth, see how Waukegan and Lake County compared to others. But what we did see is, using maps like this, from 2010 to 2020, there was an increase in Waukegan's tree canopy from 25% to 28%. And if we look at all the open plantable space in Waukegan, that number of fees could theoretically be put all the way up to 81%. The highest percentage of canopy, so the place that we found the majority of trees to be, was residential areas and natural areas, so your forest preserves, your neighbors' houses, etc. And in natural areas, we want to point out that there we saw some of the more sensitive species, such as oaks, because this area used to be Oakland savanna. They are keystone species that provide a lot of benefits to other species within the ecosystem, and unfortunately, 17% of oak ecosystems still remain to this day. So, as I mentioned before, this is another visualization of the plantable area that Waukegan has compared to what would not be suitable for a tree, such as straight pavement. I've personally not had much success planting right on the road, but 28% is already tree canopy. So if you did take advantage of all that 54%, that's where you could theoretically get up to the 8%. So now, for the specific benefits of trees, we've looked at the canopy, kind of what it's composed of, now to what the trees actually provide for us. You might have heard that trees are considered a piece of infrastructure, critical infrastructure. Most infrastructure, like buildings and highways, provide us. Hello, there we go. But one key difference between the two is simply that trees over time, because they get larger, because they're able to store more things, they're able to filter more air, they actually increase in value over time, whereas highways, buildings, they deteriorate, they need repairs, they get a little more pricey as time goes on. All right. If you've heard of the urban heat island, then you might already have a step up on everybody else, but the urban heat island effect is something that we see in places where there's a lot of paved construction, a lot of road. Those surfaces have a tendency to absorb a lot of heat and reflect it a lot. So the essential bounce back of light. Hello? All right. Maybe. Really loud, and that's okay. The urban heat island effect in areas that are very paved can increase the temperature by significant amounts. I don't know if you've ever experienced this yourselves, but I've had moments where I was driving out of Chicago in early winter. Hello. Let's hope it holds. Sorry, you're going to have to turn your heads and lean a little bit one way. Continue. Trees and the all right. Because they don't reflect as much heat and because they provide shade to any paved areas, where they encourage water molecules to pull the area around us. And large mature trees, larger than those 6 inches, actually reduce temperatures. It doesn't sound like, but I'm pretty sure most of us would feel a little more. This is another one of those maps that you can see on chicagorti.org, and it's simply a heat map, and this is where we can compare the different heat temperatures on average annually that are experienced versus the tree canopy. And if you look in the southernmost corner where you see that little square rectangle at the bottom, you can tell that area on the surface temperature map, it's pretty bright red, it's pretty hot. And on the tree canopy, it's pretty bare. There's next to nothing there. And whereas in other areas where you see a little bit more green, you do see a bit of more of a yellow, almost getting into that greenish color, which means lower temperatures on average annually. Next is stormwater mitigation. We mentioned runoff. So this map, again, another one on our website, it provides the different risks for stormwater and flooding. And Waukegan's not too bad, about halfway, a little over halfway on the scale with a 6.89. The higher it is, the more of a risk there is for flooding. But trees, they can help reduce the risk of floods simply because they drink up water. They need it just like you and I, and so the larger they are, they can pull up more water, and not only do they pull up water, they pull up pollutant, sediment, and contaminants that otherwise could run off into our streams, which we should be trying to clean up a little bit. I don't know about you, but a cleaner stream is something that I'm gonna be a lot more happy with. Even walking, sometimes if they smell a little, maybe not the most pleasant thing. As I mentioned, mature trees absorb and store larger quantities of water, and so they reduce the amount of water that's going into the stormwater system so that it doesn't get overwhelmed. And they also filter out harmful bacteria and make it a healthier area and cleaner water so that any flooding that does occur, it's not as unpleasant for other animal species that might be in some of those puddles. And as you can see from that image, anywhere that you see those larger trees, there is still a little bit of flooding, but it's a lot lower and a lot less significant compared to the field that's behind those trees where it's going to be a much larger issue. Now, tying in somewhat with runoff of water, we have erosion, which is kind of a runoff of soil. Bare soil and dry soil, it crumbles away. If you've ever had clay, if it dries out, it's really easy to crack and crumble. The soil around us is the same, and especially with the droughts that we've been experiencing recently, this has become an increasingly damaging problem. Wind, rain, and snow melt, if it's harsh enough with dry, damaged soil, it's going to exacerbate those issues. And even though most of us might think of erosion along cliff sides, maybe if any of you know, Waukegan did send some sandbags to help along the edge of Lake Michigan where there's significant erosion happening along the dunes there. But this can actually also happen in your neighborhood. If there's not necessarily a steep slope, but you have somewhat of a slope, a little decline, erosion can actually make that a tripping hazard. It could cause people to slip and fall more easily. Or if it's too close to a house, too close to a sidewalk, it can actually cause damage to property and infrastructures. And trees, they help reduce this by providing essentially a mesh for soil to cling to, and they retain moisture. So if the soil's a little bit damp, it's not going to be as crumbly, it's not going to crack very easily, and it's going to reduce the likelihood that erosion will happen to begin with. Now, air quality, the one that most people know about because trees help us breathe. They absorb CO2 and they put out oxygen for us. This map is looking at the air toxins in the area, so the lower the number, the better, and Waukegan is actually doing all right. The general area is actually doing rather well, but an 8.1 on a 0 to 5 scale, a 1.8, sorry, on a 0 to 5 scale. And mature trees, again, that's what we're looking at, they can absorb 120 to 240 pounds of particulate pollution per year. That's not just CO2, that's several other different things that can be in the air that can be irritating or harmful to us when we're outdoors. Urban trees specifically remove 711,000 metric tons of air pollution every single year. And if we put a monetary number to that, it's going to be 3.8 billion. And again, the lower the toxin rating for this map, the fewer pollutants in the air. So Waukegan, not too bad, quite honestly, doing pretty well. Some of the specific pollutants that trees absorb are, again, the classic carbon dioxide, but they also absorb sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, and plenty of others. And one that is specifically associated with cars, for example, is ozone. When cars are running to heat someone, or if you're sitting in the parking lot in the winter waiting for someone to come outside of the store and you have your car running, trees help reduce the amount of ozone because they are acting kind of as a blanket during that time of the year so that your car doesn't produce as much ozone because it's not working as hard to try and keep you warm. All right, carbon sequestration. So trees, again, they absorb CO2, but they don't just make it disappear. They sequester it and they hold it for us and prevent it from essentially getting back out into the system. And because they store it in their cells, the larger a tree grows, once it's established, again, it's putting out more roots, more leaves, more branches. That means it's storing more and more carbon every single time in all of those parts of its body, essentially. The amount of carbon annually sequestered increases with the size and health of the tree. If you have a tree that's not doing so great, it's going to struggle a little bit. But this is the main reason why preservation and reforestation is so crucial when it comes to addressing climate issues, because we know that the longer a tree lasts, the more it's going to be able to help with reducing the amount of carbon that's in the area. All right, so again, another little pie chart, but if we want to take these main benefits of air quality, carbon sequestration, and stormwater, and this is with the data from 2010, so right now these numbers would be higher since you've seen an increase in tree canopy. Annually, with those numbers from 2010, it would be $1.25 million worth of benefits for just these benefits alone. And carbon stored as a total, when this data was taken, was estimated to be $11.57 million. All right, so again, I mentioned before, most of the trees that we saw for your tree canopy are being found in residential and natural areas. So if we look at all of the residential space in Waukegan, you're gonna see that a good chunk of it is vegetation and tree canopy, and it far outmatches anything else when it comes to different categories of land use. So what does having it on more residential areas, what effects does it have? And one that a lot of people, it's important to them, is the economic benefit. It's great that we can breathe more easily and the water's being a little cleaner, but is there anything that could help us a little, because money can sometimes be a little tight? And there is, as I mentioned before, reducing energy costs associated with heating and cooling. In the summer, it's going to help reduce temperatures so you don't have to have the AC on all the time. Trees are attractive. Rental rates for business properties and houses can go up because, hey, trees are nice, trees are pretty. And then they actually have been seen to increase traffic to business and storefront areas because of that. The average annual net benefit of a mature large tree in a yard was calculated by, well, specifically McPherson, but this was through the Forest Service itself. They calculated to be that it would be an annual benefit of $85 in a yard and $113 on public land. And that difference is there because a public tree is going to be able to provide benefits simply to more people rather than on someone's personal yard. For Chicago specifically, the value of their urban forest is $2.3 billion as well. So Chicago's not doing as great as Waukegan when it comes to tree canopy, but it's still no small number. We'll take questions at the end if you could. And then lastly, I mentioned that visitors are more likely to spend time around businesses and in stores. And it's been calculated that they will spend 9 to 12% more in that area simply because if you buy an ice cream, but there's no nice shady place to sit, you're more likely to just leave right away. But if there's a nice tree to sit under, to enjoy the weather, to not be so hot under the direct sun, you might stop by and you might notice, hey, there's a little store there, let's go and check it out. So that's gonna work for a lot of people. I know it works for me. All right. And it's not just locals, it's tourists as well. Tourists have always been attracted to more trees, more vegetation, more nice, pretty areas to sit and enjoy the new sights that they're experiencing. Shade from just reduce the temperatures, it reduces the rate of aging for road and pavement, so it helps reduce the amount of repairs that have to happen in the area, simply because they're not getting beaten down on by the sun 24/7, or 12/27, I guess. Trees have also been encouraged to have shoppers come and revisit the shopping area simply because there are those nice places to sit and enjoy, and they provide a high on their investment into them. A tree, if you go out and purchase a tree right now, it might seem a little bit pricey, but again, as they get bigger, as they get older, they're going to provide more and more benefits, so the return that you get on them is going to be much higher than your initial investment. And of course, health benefits. Trees, they help us breathe, but they also do many other things. They help with other health conditions such as asthma, heart conditions, anyone struggling with obesity, stress reduction, and mood improvement. If you have anything that you are encouraged to exercise for, to re-heal a leg that got broken or something like that, you're more likely to go out and walk and stretch it out if it's nice outside, if there are trees outside, versus dry, empty pavement, right? And it's not just physical, it's mental benefits as well. Studies have shown that children with ADD actually perform better after they've had some time to spend outside. They can focus a little bit more. And there have been several studies showing that if someone just came out of surgery, if they have trees and vegetation outside of their window, they actually recover in a more long-term sustainable way and faster than patients who haven't had any exposure to trees or grass since their surgery. And of course, we've all heard the suggestion of if you're in a bad mood, if you're having a rough day, go take a walk. There have been studies that have shown that we do naturally associate and respond positively to seeing the colors of green that trees and vegetation have. So we associate them with positive engagement, revitalization, reduced tension, confusion, anger, stress, and depression. And again, trees accrue more value as they age. benefits, they increase because a small sapling, if we're looking at mental health, might make you feel happy because it's a cute little tree for a little while, but as it gets big, it becomes something magnificent that you can be in awe of. It helps inspire you a little more. Sequestration and filtering benefits increase, again, simply because the tree is bigger, it can handle more of that pollution. Initial investments become proportionally smaller as time goes on because those benefits that you are getting bigger along with the tree. And trees are a marker of quality for natural areas. So if you're trying to estimate whether an ecosystem is healthy or not, they, as with oaks as a keystone species, are a good indicator of saying, hey, this area is either healthy and it's coming back, or this might be a historical site that you really want to preserve because there are other species in this area that are sensitive and doing well. And to bring it down to an even more focused lens, the Walk Grow project. So one of the projects that I have through CRTI is known as the Walk Grow project. It is a project that started with a 2-year planning grant from the USDA under their Urban Agriculture Innovation Program. And it was started initially as simply seeing if there is interest and support and providing education and information on food forests, which are used to help improve access to fresh, healthy food that's grown locally. And even though it started as a bar of, oh, we want at least 8 workshops and we want X amount of people to talk to answer questions for, we ended up actually planting at different locations. And this year, we were able to plant at 4 locations. Some of these might be familiar to you. If you are, go and take a look. But we were able to plant 11 trees at the Holy Family Church, 24 trees and 6 really little saplings over at the John Lewis Middle School, 20 trees and 4 saplings at both Cristo Rey College Prep and the Madeline Fuqua Garden, which is over by the BMX track. And these trees, serving as a food forest, they don't just provide food. They don't just provide edible fruits or seeds, nuts, or any other type of edible plant portion, let's call them. But they also are supporting food kitchens, they're supporting education, and they're providing opportunities for people to learn where their food comes from, not just in a logical sense of you understand that food comes from a farm, gets brought to the store, and then you purchase it, but they actually get to experience that process. And it also helps them with native species specifically, exploring foods and species that they might not have the opportunity to interact with at all to begin with. One of my favorites is the pawpaw tree. It's a native to Illinois, but unfortunately because the fruit does not hold well, it does not freeze well, stores don't carry it. It's not beneficial, it's not efficient for them, but it is extremely tasty in custards and muffins. I will attest to that. And now, as for the outreach that we were able to do, aside from the plantings themselves, we did have those 8 workshops, but it wasn't just us. We had partners that we'd originally reached out to see if there was any interest to begin with, and it was 8 large groups and even more that reached out to us and said, we would love to host, we would love to make this a partnership workshop. And those were groups like Greentown Grows, Eating Restoration, Contemporary Farmer Inc., the College of Lake County. We had a workshop down, I believe, 2 streets over here, and several others. And with over 180 participants from the workshops alone, this was not counting the plantings or any other outreach that we did, but there was clearly interest that people, they're interested in trees and they want to know more about how trees can benefit us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to take a quick drink of water before we get started with the next section, and then we'll take questions on both at the end, please. All right, thanks so much, Natalie. That was great. So we can see that there are a lot of benefits from trees directly in Waukegan. We can see there's interest from your residents in these tree issues. Sorry, I was told to stay on the side of the room. I'm a wanderer, so I will try and stay over here. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can maximize those benefits, how we can think about planning for trees into the future, and how things like policy and law can help us with those processes. So Waukegan's in good shape with a growing canopy, but the bad news is that across the nation, we're actually seeing decrease in tree canopy. A lot of that is largely attributed to changes in things like increased development or impervious surfaces. We're seeing growth in things like built surfaces, parking lots that are replacing what these used to be. And so we know that we need a plan to plant and protect trees and really make them something that's intentional in our communities, because we know, as you heard from Natalie, those larger, healthier trees are going to provide us with more benefits. And so achieving canopy goals, which is something that a lot of communities are considering right now. So Waukegan has 28% canopy, maybe you set a goal for 30%. And a lot of times people think, okay, we're going to plant, we're going to focus on planting. Well, if you don't think about the things you already have and you're only focused on the planting side, you may actually see some reduction in canopy. We're seeing that we didn't anticipate it, that canopy level down because there are more construction projects and more trees are being removed from those. So we need a plan to plant and protect what we already have. One way to do that is we can set ourselves up for policy and law. And management is necessary. So Natalie was talking about infrastructure, right? So we have to do maintenance on roads, we have to do maintenance on buildings, and we have to do maintenance on trees. But unlike other types of infrastructure, they accrue value over time. But it's important people think, well, I'll plant this tree and then it'll grow and it'll be there and I don't really have to do anything with it. But really we need to be thinking intentionally about how we're going to care for that tree and maximize all of those benefits that we just heard about. A lot of times in communities we see that they recognize if we're removing trees that we should try and replace them, but unfortunately many communities have replacement rates that are too low. So they think if I remove one tree, I'll plant one tree back in the space that it is. That makes sense, right? But when we're thinking about trees accruing value over time, a small tree is not going to replace the value, the benefits that were being produced by that large tree that was removed. And trees are long-lived organisms. They take decades to grow and get back to where they were before. So if we remove a tree and we're only planting one tree to replace it, we're having a net loss in the benefits that those trees are providing. And so we always encourage communities to think about if you are removing trees, let's mandate a replacement so we know we have some trees going back in, and let's try and go above and beyond that one-to-one replacement rate. We're at least trying to accrue some more of those benefits that are being lost. In 2022, only about 10% of communities, municipalities in Illinois had a formal urban forest management plan. And so we know some people are really starting to think about this, but there's a lot of communities who have been managing trees without a direct plan. And we're going to talk about what those management plans might look like and some resources in case that's something that you all are interested in doing in the future. So again, we're looking at this question. Does your community replace more or replant more trees than it removes? Many communities aren't in Illinois. We're seeing these reductions in canopy. And remember, as Natalie mentioned, a lot of our urban forests are private land, not public land. And so as a municipality, you have the ability to plant on your public right-of-ways and in some cases some parks. But a lot of your urban forest is on those residential properties. And so there are only a few limited ways that you can really affect what kind of canopy is there, how it's protected, and how it might grow into the future. Impacts like pests and disease are also having a big influence on this in our region. Obviously, emerald ash or EAB has been pretty devastating to the ash populations here. We've lost a lot of trees in a very short amount of time. And so we're trying to also think about how we can replace the benefits of those trees that were lost. In short, we can protect what we already have from unnecessary removal. We can mandate replacements when trees do have to go down. I don't want to put out the idea that no tree should ever be cut down. That's not really the case. There are times when trees do need to be removed, and that's okay. But we want to try and make sure that we're not losing the benefits that those trees would have provided to our communities, and to replace them and maintain and grow canopy into the future. And then we also want to make sure that we're proactively managing and planting the urban forest. So again, those large, healthy trees are going to provide the most benefits. So the more management we can provide to them, the more we can work on their health and structure, the more benefits they'll give back to our communities. In many municipalities, trees are unfortunately an afterthought in planning processes. Maybe you have a new road construction project or a new building built. A lot of times that landscape plan doesn't come in until all of the other plans are done and approved. So if I could leave you with one tip of advice for today, it's to start thinking about trees as part of your developments, redevelopments, and planning processes earlier in the process, whenever you're able to. And there are a lot of ways that we can plan and protect forests. And I'm going to dive into a few of these very kind of treat this as a primer. I'm not going to go too in-depth on any of these, but we do have some question and answer time afterwards if there's any topics that really interest you. So urban forest master plans are kind of our high-level strategic plans. We're going to look at things like urban and community forestry management plans. Tree ordinances are a big topic these days. And then also, the more you can involve professional staff, folks who have knowledge about trees, their biology, their growth, earlier in the planning process can help produce better outcomes for trees at the end. So master plans are our broadest level strategic plans. There is actually a master plan for our region that the Morton Arboretum and CRTI produced. And so these are going to create things like blueprints in a community. If you're a municipality that has a master plan, this is where you're going to try and figure out how many staff members do we think we need, what's our 20-year goal, how are we going to kind of overall structure how trees fit into our broader concepts. So they're more common in larger municipalities. I've worked with a couple of them. I don't know of too many at the municipal level in Illinois, but like I said, there are some regional plans that you can look to as well. And they're a great place to tie urban forests into other strategic plans of your community. So trees can help you accomplish other goals that trees might not come to mind first, a tool to accomplish them. So when we look at communities are increasingly adding sustainability plans, climate action plans, trees can be really important components in those. Trees can work towards your community strategy. They can help with things like flood mitigation. So remember, trees have all of these really excellent benefits. And so the more that we can start to think about how can adding trees or maintaining trees help us accomplish other community goals like improving our city's perception or working towards some other economic goals, this is a really great tool in your tool belt that you can use. So taking kind of a step down is into the details is the urban forest management plans. These are going to be shorter term. And they're going to include things like visions for your urban forest. They're often and should be based on current digital inventories of the trees that you have. So you can keep in mind that when we are going to manage something, the most effective way is to understand what you have first before you start to manage it. So inventories are a really great way of doing that, assessing the current situation in your urban forest. And these can also tie to other strategic plans and goals. Importantly, they'll have implementation steps. So a lot of times I see communities, they'll set up maybe a 20-year urban forest master plan with 5-year urban forest management plan steps contained inside of it. And then one of the important components, it's something that should be monitored and updated. We never like to see plans written and put on a shelf, right? And definitely sit up there. We love to see these things as living documents that are often gone back to and assessed and looking at whether or not it's achieving the goals that you saw in the community. So most frequently we see these on what's called an adaptive management cycle. So we're assessing what do we have, what do we want, how are we going to get there, and then doing some implementation and then going back and reassessing, is that implementation that we're doing effectively achieving the goals that we want? And if it's not, we change course, we shift actions, and we realign. And then tree ordinances are another really common way that communities engage with their trees. So these are something that can be a framework for community cooperation and expectation. It's important that if you have multiple people that are making decisions for trees, you've got in a municipality, you have the residents, you have maybe DOT folks, having a common understanding for how you have collectively decided to deal with trees and value them can be very helpful. Tree ordinances can help us to protect and preserve existing trees, to promote tree planting, and help ensure sustainable management of the urban forest into the future. And community engagement is key with these discussions. So when I came in, I saw there's a flyer on the front that had a QR code. You could go and look into what's going on with the Unified Development Ordinance and have community input. So it's really great to see Waukegan's already considering things. Community engagement is important because if you decide to implement a law that your constituents and residents don't care for, you're going to have more pushback. It's not going to be effectively moving you towards the goals that you have set as a community. So ordinances, as simply as I like to put it, are your written commitment to the continuation and success of your urban forest. There are a number of types of tree ordinances, and I'm going to try and keep this interesting. I can get really into the details, unfortunately, sometimes, so I'm going to kind of focus on 2 of these that we see most commonly in Illinois. We have things that we call tree protection ordinances, which can affect public or private property, depending on the community that they're enacted in. And these generally focus on land that's already been developed. So these are the things that are going to affect your parkways and your residential properties in some case, depending on whether or not you're dealing with private land as well. Then we have development and zoning. We call those preservation ordinances generally. So these are trees before, during, and after major construction. So our protection ordinances will probably not deal with any of those big construction issues. Even like a lot tear down may go into something like a unified development code instead. And there are some other ordinances that are less common, but you may see, so some communities may have stormwater ordinances or natural area ordinances, depending on what kind of properties the city contains. And we also see in other areas, especially like view shed ordinances. So I used to live out on the West Coast, and that was a big deal. You know, if my neighbor wants to see a view of the ocean and they want to cut down my tree, how do we deal with that legally, right? So first we're going to look at these protection ordinances. Tree protection ordinances generally dictate a couple of things: who has authority over trees, what kind of standards for the care of those trees our community has committed to, and they protect trees from harm or removal. Generally, these are in effect 24/7, 365. We'll talk about development are keyed in or by some sort of process. So these are going to be something that no matter what's going on, your trees are going to be protected. Generally, in most communities, we see these as, you know, how do we protect our street trees? What happens if someone wants to nail a sign to it? Or if a resident goes out and does some pruning that we don't agree with, if it maybe doesn't follow our standards? How, as a community, have we agreed to deal with that? Many communities get their first kind of foray into tree protection ordinances through the Tree City USA program. So those things that are listed above are requirements to become a Tree City USA. You have to have an ordinance that's in effect 24/7, 365. It has to list the standards of care, and it has to designate who your authority is. So in some communities, that could be a forestry department, an urban forester, could be the public works department. And in communities that don't have that kind of professional staff or knowledge, they may also use something like a tree board, where it's a voluntary group that comes together to help make decisions about trees. So many folks are looking at their tree ordinances. Many ordinances in our neck of the woods are getting a little bit older. Many were written and last updated in the 80s and 90s and are still being used today. In some communities, those are effective. In some, they're deciding that they want to go back and look at those and reestablish what their goals are for their community. We receive a lot of questions. We offer ordinance support, and we receive a lot of questions about what are other cities doing. And some communities care a little bit more. It's kind of that idea of, you know, what are my peers doing? What should I be doing? Some cities are more focused on their own work, and they don't really care what other communities are doing. But in urban forestry, we have what's called a duty of care. And so there's kind of a baseline that we have to follow in terms of how much management we're doing, how we're dealing with things like risk. And so understanding what other communities in your area do to manage their trees can be an important part of that. And you don't have to start from scratch or reinvent the wheel. This can be really intimidating for a lot of communities. You know, maybe you have decided we want to protect more trees, but we're not really sure where to start. There are a lot of resources out there. You're not the first city to implement those things, and so we're going to talk a little bit about some tools that you can use for updating tree ordinances. But what you do have to do is you have to tailor those resources to your community goals. So it's good to start with your goal in mind and figure out what your community wants out of this. Is it increased canopy? Is it, you know, we want to increase the maintenance that we do on trees to reduce liability? Understanding your goals and then tailoring your ordinance to fit and achieve those goals is important. So the CRTI released a couple of new tools to help communities to update or create tree ordinances. So the first that I'll talk about today is our ordinance builder for tree protection. And so that outlines a number of key components that we have found through the literature and through experience of a lot of different folks that came together on a work group of the basic things that should go into an ordinance. And we see these as kind of the key fundamental building blocks. There are many other things that could also go into this, but we understood that, you know, it has to be something that can kind of be mixed and matched for communities because not everybody has the same capacity or the same goals. So we're going to look at a couple of these components because I know there's a lot of text on the screen and I can barely read it from where I am. So let's dive in and look at just a couple of these that we've already mentioned before. So who has authority over trees? Ordinance can designate that authority. Like I said, it could be a forestry department, maybe your public works department, or a tree board. And then your ordinance is also going to give enforce that law. So enforcement's really important, right? I could write the best ordinance in the world that protects the most trees, and if I have no one that's going to go out and look and see if trees are removed, that ordinance is not effective. So we want to make sure that we're matching our capacity and our enforcement capacity with the goals and laws that we're putting down in our ordinances. So there really is no point in having an ordinance without enforcement. We can look at things like standards of so your ordinance can say that, we are going to follow the industry standards for how you should prune a tree. There are a lot of really excellent resources available. The American National Standards Institute publishes our industry standards for arboriculture. It's the ANSI 800 is the standard name. And so that's, again, something you don't have to reinvent. You don't have to decide, how am I supposed to communicate with a contractor that maybe is doing pruning in my community, how they're allowed to prune trees. We have those written down, available for folks to engage with. Your ordinance would probably also then talk about relocation or replacement. So remember, there are situations where trees do need to be removed. Maybe they have become too old or they're presenting some sort of unacceptable risk to our community, and we know we have to remove them. How are we going to make sure that we're replacing those trees and maintaining those benefits in the community? And then we're starting to see, and we're recommending more and more, that community inventory and management plans into their ordinance. So it is a mandate that they have these plans. There's a lot of benefit to having a plan, which is flexible and can be updated regularly, and an ordinance, which is rigid and hard to change, right? So we can have things in our ordinance that we know we want to be there for the long term, and then we can have things that we know might change go into a plan that is related to that ordinance. So, for example, a species list is something you could put in a management plan that wouldn't fit in an ordinance very well. I see a lot of communities that still say, yeah, go plant green ash or white ash, even though we've been dealing with emerald ash borer for years. And so having that kind of flexibility of using those two tools in tandem can be very, very helpful. And then we'll also see things like protection for trees. So how do we do permitting processes? Who is allowed to do what to our trees? At one point, hold on, you're now working against our community goal. That's not something that we want. We need to stop that. And penalties might go along with those conversations. And then in communities that don't have trees in their development code, we might also see protection of adjacent trees during construction. So say I'm a homeowner and I want to redo my driveway, but I have a parkway tree that's right next to it. How am I able to interact with that tree to make sure that my work doesn't unnecessarily damage a public good? So in this tool, like I said, we knew it had to be flexible and we wanted it to be applicable for the most communities. So for every one of those bullet points on the previous slide, I think there's 17 of them, we have examples of what that might look like in a community. And we have 3 levels of suggested use. A basic use, where if you're doing less than that, it's probably not really worth putting in your ordinance. A recommended use, which CRTI sees as something that any community that's ready to commit to trees and invest in them can attain. And then an aspirational level for those that really want to be leaders in our communities in tree protection. Along with these are examples of these components in code in communities in Illinois. So you can go in and you can say, I don't really know how I want to set up my permit process. We know we want to take a step up from where we are right now, but maybe we're not really ready to go to that aspirational level. You can go in, click, look, what does CRTI recommend for permits, and then see an example of what that looks like in Naperville or in Highland Park or in Joliet or another community in Illinois. There's also a number of advanced components. So these are kind of the things that you can start to add on as you're ready to protect more trees, as you're ready to invest more effort and time into your tree protection ordinance. So I'm just going to point out a couple of the ones that are the most common. We see things like establishment of a tree advocacy group or a tree board as one that comes up frequently. We encourage this. We think it's a great way for community members to be involved in the tree decision-making process. For many communities that don't have professional staff, this is also a great way to get maybe an arborist that lives in your community to come in and make some recommendations about trees. Tree banks are fairly common. So, if you do have penalties or fines or fees, a lot of communities choose to put them into a specialized account rather than into their general fund, so that money can then be used for tree issues. So if you're fining someone for illegally removing a tree, to me, it makes sense that you use that fund then to go and you replant a tree somewhere else. So tree banks are one way that you can kind of control some of that cash flow. And then legacy and heritage tree protection is also very common. Communities decide, we have these important trees to us historically, or we're ready to start protecting more trees, but maybe not all of them. You can say, we want to protect our largest or our most historically important or our significant trees in our community. And so these are special protections afforded to those. We also have tree preservation ordinances, and I know we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to speed up just a little bit. But these are the things like your landscape code that's going to be in Unified Development Code. So again, remember we're talking about those ones that are trees before, during, and after major construction. And they're going to be triggered by some sort of development action, so a permit or other mechanism such as a concept plan. And these are going to try and protect trees from damage and unnecessary removal, especially during those development actions. Similarly to the other ordinances, they're going to delegate who has authority over that ordinance, what the decision-making process looks like, and how they are able to enforce it. And it will help ways that developers can minimize damage to trees through penalties and, importantly, incentives. I don't like to say a community should go out and just penalize folks, right? The development community is an important part of our community at large, and we want to make sure that there are incentives in place as well to encourage them to participate rather than just penalizing them if they don't. We have another ordinance builder that is available here. Very similar, lots of different components that go into that baseline, basic components. But unlike the other one, we're going to be looking more at like permitting. We're going to be looking at land surveys. We're going to be looking at what kind of trees are on site, which ones are proposed to be removed, which ones are going to be kept, and in what conditions you might allow removals to happen. So a anecdote, what could an ordinance like this look like? Maybe a developer wants to take a lot that has trees and a building and tear down that building and rebuild. So it's a redevelopment. Those trees are providing a public good, and your community has decided in your ordinance to protect the largest of them. So we're just going to look at maybe large shade trees. The developer would have to submit a plan for which trees they want to remove and explain why. And maybe your arborist or someone in your community planning department can look at that plan and see, oh, if we flip the building, same footprint, but we put the driveway on the right side instead of the left side, we only have to remove one tree instead of three. And so it could become a conversation with that developer to make the small change that would actually help retain that public good. So your ordinance has allowed you to review, assess, and retain trees, providing that public good. So tree preservation ordinances, all tree ordinances, can vary a lot in impact and scope. Really, I see ordinances as a spectrum, and so we can look at things like what kind of zoning we might be applying these to, what kind of land use there might be. Parcel size is another one. I would be a little bit cautious of this. We want to make sure that we're not producing an undue burden on any particular part of your community. I do see some communities that say, when you go over 2 acres in size for a development, additional protections kick in, or you have to do a landscape plan at that scope or something. And then obviously ownership of land is a big question. Are we talking about public land or private land? I unfortunately see a lot of municipalities that exempt themselves from their own tree protections. And so while they say, you as a resident need to file for a permit and you may not remove this tree, they don't put those same restrictions on themselves. And so you can see municipalities that are unfortunately damaging their own canopy because they have exempted themselves from those restrictions. So I always recommend that communities follow the same rules that they impose on others. And then we may look at things like tree size or condition. So different communities say, our protections start at 6 inches in diameter, or 10 inches in diameter, or 30 inches in diameter. And we also want to make sure that we're preserving trees that are worth preserving. So if I'm dealing with a new undeveloped lot, and there are a bunch of really poor quality, unhealthy trees, which ones am I really going to think about? Are these going to be here in 10 years, even if this development doesn't happen? And prioritize protections in those cases. So this doesn't have to be all or nothing. Again, it can kind of be this conversation with developers especially. And communities may have rigid rules, which is good in some cases, and some communities choose to be more flexible. So it really comes down to how you want to interact with your development community. And they should be a part of creating these zoning ordinances, right? They should be at the table when you're starting to make these decisions. So it's not something that's just imposed on them, but it's something that they have had the opportunity to collaborate with you to construct. I want to make a really quick note about protection during preservation. So there's a pretty common misconception that trees have roots that go straight down, very deep. And in our area, that's not really the case. There are some trees that have deeper roots in some parts of their root system, but really we see roots extending quite a lot further than people think, generally out to or past the drip line of the tree, generally in the top 16 to 18 inches of soil. And so as we're thinking about, I'm going to be doing construction on this parcel, a lot of people think, okay, well, we'll protect the trunk of the tree. No one will hit the branches with our trucks, and it'll be fine. And they pile material on the root zone of that tree, and the soil is compacted, and those roots can't get the water and oxygen that they need, and they start to suffer. Roots show up in a tree in a way that we can see it for 3, 5, 7 years after construction. So we want to make sure that we're protecting the roots of those trees. And again, we've got really great industry standards that are already there ready for you to adopt that can help you determine how far that protection zone has to be out, what kind of fencing we should put up, how do we explain signage to contractors who are on site, that kind of thing. And then same as before, enforcement's really, really critical here. And so we really encourage you to engage with your developers before and after design process and work with them throughout the process. Clarity and educational resources in plain language is very, very helpful. I read a lot of tree ordinances, and they are very confusing sometimes. And so if you have an ordinance that has to be complex for legal reasons, that doesn't mean that you can't have a pamphlet that goes along with it that explains in really easy to understand language what kind of regulations are there, why, and help to encourage those folks to, instead of trying to penalize them after something happens and a tree has been irreparably damaged, to get them on board early in the process. And that idea of one-to-one replacement. So ordinances, you know, we see a lot where you can go in and you can clear as many trees as you want, but you have to replant a certain number afterwards. If that's the case, or if there's any removal and replacement, we want to try and aim for more than that one-to-one replacement, because we know not every tree we plant survives to maturity, and we know that we're reducing the benefits that those trees are providing because they're smaller, and it'll take decades for them to grow into that large mature size again. So I want to offer some additional support. We're only here for an hour tonight, but we do provide ordinance assistance to communities in the Chicago region, 7 counties around Chicago, for tree protection and preservation advice. If you have questions about ordinances, we're available to chat with you. We can help you walk through those ordinance builders. They were designed as a tool to help us help communities. So if you're reading them and you don't understand something, or you're not sure how it really fits with your community, talk to us. We're more than happy to have those conversations with you. The ordinance builders are available online. I had some QR codes up there. I also have at the very end of this slideshow a list of links to all of the stuff that we've been talking about. And on December 4th, we're holding a virtual webinar on trees and development called Don't Be Stumped, Navigating Law and Economic Development Tree Preservation. So our recommendations for tree preservation ordinances are really hot off the press, and so we are still really trying to get that information out there. This presentation will have folks that know a lot more than I do. We've got an attorney on board, we've got someone from the development community on board, and some of the folks that help build out those recommendations that CRTI has for these ordinances. And you can always find more resources online, CRTI, chicagorti.org and mortonarb.org. And Natalie also has some new virtual information bundles that are available on the Arboretum's website, right? Okay, excellent. There are grants. We have funding coming to Illinois. This is very important. The Inflation Reduction Act, if you're not familiar with it, is bringing $1.5 billion of funding to urban forestry through the USDA Forest Service across the country. It's huge. It's unprecedented. We haven't seen that kind of funding for our work before. And the Morton Arboretum is going to be helping administer part of that funding in Illinois. So we have grants for large city inventory and management planning for up to $3 million for communities over 75,000 residents. And we have other urban forestry projects between $25,000 and $150,000. These are 4-year grant terms. Something that we also haven't seen before is these longer grants. Usually we're kind of stuck on an 18-month cycle. And so we've got more money, we have a longer time to do it. It gives you a lot more opportunity for things like community engagement, which is really important. And critical for these Inflation Reduction Act amount, there will be no match requirement for communities that are considered disadvantaged. That is huge. So the White House's Justice 40 initiative is a big part of why this money is rolling out. And so for communities that are considered disadvantaged by a number of federal tools, you don't have to add match, which is something that can be a big barrier for a lot of communities. So if you're not familiar, match is kind of like splitting the bill. If you get a $20,000 grant, most of the time we have to say, you have to put in $20,000 too, so it's a $40,000 project. In this case, that match is waived for disadvantaged communities. So you can join us next week, November 14th, for an informational session about all of the funding coming through the IRA to Illinois. And we'll be in person on the 16th down in Mundelein for talk about some of the specific grants that are rolling out in the next couple of weeks, actually. All right, so I'm going to wrap up here. Remember, large trees provide your constituents more benefits and need to be managed and protected like other infrastructure from damage and unnecessary removal. Excuse me. Public trees need to be maintained, and we have really great tree standards that are available. You don't have to reinvent the wheel on those. Tree ordinances come in a spectrum, and they should meet your community's goals. And there are some clear paths to figure out where you are now, where you want to go, and how you can get there. Investing in trees is a really interesting thing. There's a lot of great quotes about planting trees and the best time being tomorrow, and smart people plant trees for the future. But when we're dealing with these long-lived organisms, these trees can live a lot longer than a human lifespan if they're well taken care of. So planting a tree, protecting it, keeping it in your community is a benefit just for you or for our children, but even for our grandchildren and generations after that. So with that, we'll wrap up. Still got about 15 minutes for questions? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all very much. Yeah. So the question is the virtual meeting available in Spanish for Spanish speakers? It is a Zoom call, and right now we unfortunately don't have any translation services for that. It will have the ability to have closed captioning, though. Yes.
Hi, I'm Thomas with the mayor's office. So I have a couple questions for you. Obviously, the example for the tree values was 2007 numbers. We have, in obviously 15, 16 years later, a more modern number for what that impact per tree.
On a per tree basis?
Yeah, obviously that was one of the early slides was 100-ish, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So that is an ever-evolving science, understanding what tree valuation looks like. There's a really, really great tool that's available online that I would recommend you check out. There is a suite of tools called iTree, which you may have heard of before. It's basically how our industry looks at tree value. There's one tool in that suite that's called MyTree, and you can actually go and look at, it gives you an overhead map. You can zoom into wherever you'd like and select an individual tree. You tell the system what species it is, how large it is, and it'll spit out the numbers for what benefits that individual tree may be providing to you. So I would recommend check that out.
Very cool. And the same list of questioning or line questioning, is there a typical permit cost you find with other communities? Is there a tree grant incentive or a tree, some sort of fund that you find other communities generally seem to have?
I'm going to ask a couple clarifying questions on that one. Yeah, it's okay. So are you asking if there's normal numbers for permit issuance or?
Certainly, number one, is there a typical range of costs, or is it just simply paperwork, right? For a permit, we're going through that process, and so is that a dynamic you've seen other communities use that?
Yeah, sure. So permit fees can vary a lot depending on the community. Some communities base those on how much administrative time process that permit, and so it would really depend on your staff or.
Communities that don't charge for that, is that just sort of, hey, give us that as an afterthought? We're trying to understand those dynamics for ourselves.
Sure. So I have seen communities that have a no-cost permit process. I couldn't tell you proportionally what percentage of ordinances across the state are, any individual cost. Yep.
So again, in that same line of questioning, communities, do you find communities that require arborists of the individual residents for tree removal? Do you find that communities provide those arborists themselves? Again, another component for that maybe.
And reference to trees on public property? Private property?
Certainly public property in the city, yes.
Sure. There are not many communities in general in Illinois that have tree protection on private property that's outside of construction. So if you're looking at development, it's much more common. If you're looking at straight preservation, kind of the North Shore of Chicago is where you see most of that have private tree protections built in. Yep, and in many cases, I haven't necessarily seen many that say, you know, you have to have a certified arborist to do a removal. More so on the public tree maintenance side, communities may mandate that, you know, a crew is supervised by a certified arborist when they're doing the work, or that there has to be a certified arborist on staff at a company before they're able to contract with the municipality.
And the last question is, certainly you referenced a 29 coverage. I think we heard local lands 19% versus the region 23%. And so, as I think all of us are mindful of, are there any recommendations you have for equity, centering equity in our tree ordinances and our approach towards this that our general public are able to be best served as, you know, working class folks? This is the dynamic that both of us are very mindful of.
Yeah, a huge question. How do we incorporate tree equity into urban forestry maintenance? And that's something that really deserves a lot of attention. And when you're in the planning process of thinking about how your ordinances look, you really need to be considering those questions. We have had a few communities who are starting to ask about those, and we're starting to compile more tools whenever we can for tree equity questions. So especially as we start to look at grants for disadvantaged communities, we're starting to think about, like, what kind of resources can we bring in, speakers that can talk about tree equity issues. We like to help folks gain access to resources that are out there. And so as we start to think about more and more with these disadvantaged communities, I think the CRTI will put out more recommendations for tree equity conversations and how to have those with your community members. Yes.
Okay, I've got three questions. First off, I own an acre of land in Waukegan, which has a lot of trees in it. It was once a forest, so I have like 19 oaks, and these trees are at least 100 or 150 years old, all of them in this area, and mostly oaks, but there's also a couple on my land, a couple, not a couple, the shagbark hickories, and yeah, they're very old as well. So, on my land, I had to have 2 trees cut down some years ago before the city had an ordinance, about cutting down trees and having to get a permit. It was just when that was happening. These were 2 trees that were very close to my house. One had been trimmed, it was dying, it was leaning over the house, and the other one was very close to the house, and it was kind of leaning. The reason I called it, had to get them cut down was because, my insurance man said, if those trees fall on your house, you got $1,000 deductible on the trees, each tree. So I called and had those trees, a guy came out and looked at them, he said, they both look bad, we need to cut them down. So I had them cut down just as the ordinance was coming in and I was worried about whether that tree ordinance was gonna require me to get these, because this happened, this was years and years ago, yeah, some years ago when, what was his name, that down in Lake Forest, that had all those trees cut down.
Yeah.
So my alderman said, go ahead and have them cut down. That thing isn't in force yet. Go ahead and have those trees cut down. Had them both cut down. The guy cut them down, and both of them were in bad shape. And he said, man, you are lucky to get these down now, because the one that looked better, it was actually, both were dying, starting to die. It was hollowed out inside. And he said, either one of them could have fallen on your house, really done some damage. Big trees. Now, here's my question. On my property, well, first off, there's invasive trees that are on my property. A lot of buckthorn in the back. I should probably cut those down. But again, I don't know if the tree ordinance would come into effect or not. And I have a question about the buckthorn. If we reduce the impact, what impact is reducing the canopy of buckthorn? I know there's a lot of buckthorn around the areas. Even in the forest reserves, they've been cutting it down. What is the impact going to be when we reduce the canopy by cutting down buckthorn? In the back of my lot, there's a heck of a lot of buckthorn.
Yeah, great question.
It's pretty thick.
Right, so I've got 2 points that I can share with you. Many communities in their ordinance, they'll write that invasive species, and they'll give a list, don't need a permit. And so they allow things like buckthorn removal without a permitting process. And then, y- yeah. Yeah, so on the second point there, reducing buckthorn is going to reduce benefits because you're reducing canopy, right? So we always recommend that you remove that invasive species and then you replant with something that's appropriate for your site. And we have some resources on our website for what you can replace buckthorn with. So a lot of folks use it for screening. They really like having their buckthorn. Maybe that's the thing that blocks them from their neighbor's house. And so we've got a series called Healthy Hedges, which can help you determine what kind of species you can put back in after you remove that buckthorn to help, again, recuperate any lost benefits. But those trees are, yeah, definitely worth removing and replacing.
And one of the reasons I've left them up is because they are way in the back of my lot, and they do just what you said.
Mhm.
Block the neighbors back there. My second thing is all the oaks I have, 19 oaks and two of these others. The last couple of years, we've had a terrific, in our area, a terrific amount of moth caterpillars crawling in and eating the heck out of the leaves.
Mm.
And all of the neighbors have been very concerned. I have one tree that's been attacked for several years in the front, a big tree, and it looks pretty thin this year. I hope it survives. I've read, we sprayed, we did a lot of stuff, but it may die. And when I look at around our parks and stuff too, the park district doesn't appear to be spraying, not doing it. How bad is that? And I've heard that the gypsy moth can kill the tree if you have stress, for several years, plus if it gets attacked for, years on end, 2 to 3 years, it can die. And then I'm really worried about the spotted lantern fly. I mean, I love my trees, and that's coming into this area soon. So I'm concerned about that. And what can we do as a city? I don't want to lose a lot of oak trees. We have a lot of beautiful trees that are very big. What's that? Should we spray? Can we use any of that grant money that you said is available as a city to preserve some of these big oaks in our big trees in our city?
Great question. So I am not an entomologist. So I'm not going to tackle too much detail on spongy moth impact. I would refer you to the plant clinic at the Arboretum. They are a really wonderful resource, and there's a couple of really great informational websites up on the Arboretum's page for that. Grant funds, we are starting to see more ability to use them to treat invasives and to deal with pest issues. So right now we've got a grant out that is focused on emerald ash borer management, and part of that looks at pesticide treatment for keeping. I think that's a possibility.
Anyway, so that's one of the other concerns I have. And the final thing is, I have planted and have some pine trees as well on my property. So I've got an acre with 19 big oaks, a couple big shagbark hickories, but I put some pines on there, and one of them is right, and one's there already, and it's right on a sewer. I would hope the ordinance would let me cut a few of those pines down, which aren't really doing much, and nobody really wants pine anyway for burning. But an ordinance has to be such that somebody like me has a lot of trees. I can cut a few pine trees out, especially the one that's on my sewer, and it's not going to be. I'm hoping I wouldn't have to replace. We're talking about a pretty good pine tree, an awful lot of other little trees. The ordinance is written such that for every inch I cut down, I got to replace with 2 inches of another tree. You know what I'm saying? How do you frame ordinances like that? Do we allow somebody that has a lot of trees to get a waiver such that we can cut some trees down? Or if I hit a tree right next to my drive and I want to expand the drive a little bit, got lots of trees.
Yeah, so I can't comment on what your ordinance will look like. I do see in some communities that have larger natural areas that they will allow waivers for permits for what we consider good forestry practice. So if you have like a proper stand of trees, like a forest, there's some maintenance that goes on in those places that does include removals of trees, especially depending on the density of how close those trees are. So some communities will choose to have additional qualifications for good forestry practice. And we have some information about that in the tree protection tree protection ordinance builder you could check out. I think we probably have time for one question. Do we have to transition at 7? Yeah, okay, one more question? Yes.
Where should cities focus their planting efforts, whether that's urban versus rural or residential versus commercial?
So the question was, where should we focus our planting efforts in cities? My recommendation to you would be to do an inventory and figure out what you have and where it is, and then write a management plan, and use that as the basis for how you make those determinations, combined with community input. Yeah, so there's no hard and fast rule on, you should plant in this neighborhood first or this neighborhood first. A lot of times we see that community engagement is a really important part of tree success, and so that may also influence quite heavily where you choose to put your dollars first. Okay. All right, well, thank you all. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
All right, so a couple of really quick final comments in the last 3 minutes. For buckthorn, yes, you would be seeing an initial decrease in benefits because you are removing something that is doing some of the work of providing those benefits. But if you do plant a species that's better adapted, that is not invasive in the area, because it's better adapted, it's going to grow bigger, it's going to grow healthier, it's going to be able to provide those benefits more efficiently and for theoretically a longer period of time if it's well taken care of. For the spotted lanternfly that we are starting to see, broad spectrum, we aren't, again, not entomologists, but the plant clinic is free for any tree questions. But if you see anything of the spotted lanternfly at the moment, simply step on it, squish it, throw it into a vinegar bottle and leave it there for a week. So if you see it, get rid of it and report it, because reports help with tracking and help give information on if one area is doing well, even though they're seeing a lot of them, what are they doing to help share that information around. And lastly, I remember we had a question about whether our workshop that's coming up will be in Spanish, even though that one itself will not be available in Spanish. The virtual bundles that Zach mentioned earlier that we are providing, which are for best practices for care of trees and plants, are being provided in English and in Spanish. And if you would like more information on that, feel free to come up to me and I can give you the information there directly, or Food Forest as well. So thank you very much.
if you put this like down and then, thank you so much, really appreciate it. Thank you. So like, yeah, and then tilt it up toward you.
Sam actually told me Griffin is having problems with your hearing aid, and I was told or asked to speak up.
Or if you want to go to the other end and sit closer to her, but yeah, if you make sure. For her, say it nice and loudly. But, who was it? Somebody else said that was good idea. I know, right? It is hard to hear you. I mean, I can hear you, but not like it's I hate it, talking into these microphones. And then holding it. Well, maybe that'll work.
Okay, that's kind of like.
Sorry, run up and say hello. I know. Somebody's got to keep the status up.
Definitely, the last few, he's definitely did. Thanks for coming.
Are we on? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's 7:06 PM. I now call to order the Thursday, November 9th, 2023 meeting of the Waukegan Planning and Zoning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Anderson? Here. Bill?
Here.
Griffin? Here. Grimes?
Here.
Haug? Here. Haynes? Here. Rivera?
Here.
Rodriguez?
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. We're just getting used to some changes that have taken place beginning with the last meeting. Just want to remind all the commissioners that now you have to hold the button down as you talk, and as you let go, your microphone goes off automatically. Also, our audio-visual person that is recording this meeting is no longer sitting at the back of the room. We have the cameras up there that I guess are recording us, and he's in the back room, so we had to check before the meeting to make sure that he was there and that everything was ready to go. So apparently everything is ready to go, so we are moving on. Item 2, minutes. The minutes of the October 12th, 2023 meeting of the Waukegan Planning and Zoning Commission. You have the minutes in your packet. I assume you've all had a chance to review them. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner Haug, was that? No, who was it?
Ben.
Oh, okay, Commissioner Grimes. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Rivera. Any comments, corrections, changes to the minutes? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Anderson?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Griffin? Griffin? Grimes?
Here.
Haug?
Yeah.
Haynes?
Yes.
Rivera?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes, motion carries, minutes are approved. Item 3, audience time. This is an opportunity for anyone here who would like to address the commission on any matter, whether it's on the agenda tonight or not. And just to remind you, the items that are on the agenda are public hearings, and anybody who wants to comment, speak out on those items or speak for or against them, or even ask questions, you will be allowed to speak during the public hearing. So, but right now, we're just offering the audience, anybody in the audience, a chance to address the commission on any matter. Is there anyone? Okay, moving on. Item 4, old business. Do we have any old business we need to discuss? I don't believe we do. Okay, moving on to new business. Item 5A, zoning calendar number V-4-23, vacation of a portion of the right-of-way of Western Avenue, also known as New York Avenue, south of Beach Road. Who is going to be presenting for the city?
I will be.
Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Rachel, assistant planner with the city of Waukegan. So we have a vacation before you today over off of West Beach Road. It is a portion of the right-of-way of Western Avenue, but it's also known as New York Avenue, so that's kind of what I'll refer to it during this presentation. It's going to be east of 1607 West Beach Road, and it's in Ward 8. So this location is up near the airport. As you can see on the map, it's in an area that is kind of Waukegan, kind of Beach Park. It's kind of surrounded. So looking at that red box over there, the thicker red line is the proposed vacation. And then the thinner red line of that more of a square box, that is the petitioner. So looking historically at the site, this has been an unimproved right-of-way. As dating as far back as we have information for. It has always just been grass and trees and greenery. Previously, back prior to the kind of 60s, it was farmland as well, but it's always just been vacant, unimproved right-of-way. Between 2020 and 2022, trees and shrubs were cut down, and gravel was put down to create a makeshift driveway. This was done illegally without the permission or notification of the city. We are not sure who did this. We don't have the information for that. We just know that between 2020 and 2022, some trees were cut down and someone made a makeshift road, essentially. We presume it's for access to some properties further south in Beach Park. So looking at the site, the proposed vacation is about 1/3 of it is in wetlands. So this area has a ravine and a creek running through, as well as a significant amount of wetlands. So this area is not really buildable. It's also in a floodway, and I'll show that on our next map. That's going to be the white and red striped lines. That is the regulatory floodway. Basically, things shouldn't be built in a floodway. That's an area where water, when we have big storm events, like we've been kind of experiencing more and more, these big flood events, rain events, this is the area that kind of where that water goes. So these areas are not allowed to be built on. And that is similar to the wetlands, kind of a county, state, like that is the best practices and what we here in the city of Waukegan adhere to. So this area, part of that vacation would be in the floodway in the vacation. We've spoken with the petitioner about this, so they are aware of these conditions, of the site conditions, and know that things can't be built in that kind of shaded area that you're seeing up there. Something I did want to bring to your attention was the utilities in the area. In your packets, you received a utility map. Since that map was created and sent out to you, we did discover that there is a sewer line running south, or running from West Beach Road south down New York Avenue. Our previous maps just showed it along West Beach Road and then where it picks up in Beach Park, but it does connect there. So here's the amended version. This doesn't affect the vacation very much. All it means is that we're gonna have to get a utility easement. So this is gonna allow for the city to maintain the sewer, still get access to the site. If there's a fence in the way, they can remove the fence, do their repairs, whatever they need to do. That easement will allow the city to maintain that sewer. Nothing can be like built on top of it. So you can't build, a home on top of the sewer line. So that's what that utility easement would be doing for this. We did receive 3 objection letters. I have attached them. You should have gotten them on top of your desks. We got 2 objection letters from the same person that owns 2 properties and then an additional property. So the 2 properties in the vicinity from one owner, some of their concerns that they raised were the maintenance of the sewer. And as I previously stated, the utility easement would allow for the sewer to be maintained. There were also concerns about what the address of their property would be. So for the 38455 North New York Ave, there was some current concerns about what that property's address would be. The address would remain the same. So the other larger highlighted, see if I can move my mouse so you can see. This larger box here is also a New York Avenue address. So it's not uncommon that there's properties that don't have access to a right-of-way. We do have those properties that are completely surrounded by other properties. It's not uncommon, and then their address would just remain as is. If this vacation were to go through, they would maintain that same address. There's also concerns about access to the site in case of emergency, in case of mail, things like that. The right-of-way has never been a legal entrance or exit to those properties in the south. It has always been an unimproved right-of-way with trees and shrubs until recently when it was illegally converted to a makeshift road. It is not a road, it has never been a road. So the access to those sites will remain unchanged. There is no entrance or exit, and there never has been. If a vacation is approved, it would not change that. The property owner of 38415 North New York Ave didn't provide a reason for their objection. So due to the site conditions, staff has recommended a couple of conditions. So the amendment that you have in front of you to the staff report changes kind of the price that we were looking at recommending. So usually staff will recommend the assessed value, which is 1/3 of the market value. Due to the wetlands and the floodplain, this land is valued much, much less than it would be otherwise. Even in our calculations, we calculated the portion of the wetland area using the values of other land that was also mostly wetlands. And then we calculated the northern portion without the wetlands using the northernmost 2 properties. Kind of a weird situation with the wetlands and the floodplain, but that does really limit the use of that land. So that's why staff is recommending half of the assessed value. We also have the condition of an easement must be recorded with the plat of vacation for the existing public utilities in the right-of-way. This needs to happen. The current plat of vacation does not have that, so it will need to be updated prior to being recorded. And then we also ask that the gravel in the right-of-way be removed within 24 months and restored to green space. Some of the options before you, if this vacation ultimately is denied, the property will remain off the tax rolls, and the restoration of that space, removing the gravel, returning it to green space, will be the expense of the cities. If the approval of this vacation happens, the property will be on the tax rolls. The petitioner has stated that they plan to remove the illegal road and return it to green space. Is there any questions?
I would just like some clarification regarding exactly where these objector properties are. I don't have that as a map, and from looking up there, yeah, so, okay. So when I'm looking at one of the maps that I do have here, so I'm looking at the one that has the utilities on it, because that's the easiest to read here. Is it but no, go back to the one you had there, okay. So the first property immediately adjacent east of the section that's being requested is not the objector, it's the next property over, correct? So it's 2 properties east of the,
Correct. So the person who sent in the objection letters for 38455 and 1565, those 2 properties, those northernmost highlighted in yellow, are the same property owners. They own both of those. And so the one with the home has access from Beach Road, and then that smaller property in the back is its own kind of.
and it has no access, but it
No.
is, when you look in the floodplain map, it is completely in the floodplain.
Correct. It is
That would technically not be buildable
correct.
in any way.
Correct.
Okay, and then which was the other person? If you go back, yeah, okay, so that is
Yeah. So this one is
4 properties over, and then the lot behind that house?
correct. Yeah. So it's that middle highlighted section. They also
That
submitted.
is also at least half flood zone.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners for city staff? Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Is this not Beach Park's business?
Yeah, so the portion of the right-of-way that is being considered today is the Waukegan portion. So
I thought that our line was at your cross road.
So if you look on the screen, kind of behind you, you'll see that brown shaded color is Waukegan, and then the blue color is Beach Park. So Waukegan does extend south of Beach Road just a little bit, just for a couple pieces of land and a portion of that right-of-way. So the part that's Waukegan is what's before you today for a vacation, and then south of that is all Beach Park. So the portion that we're talking about today is all Waukegan property, but it is very adjacent to those Beach Park properties and the Beach Park right-of-way. Does that kind of help explain it?
Commissioner Bill.
I did a site visit today, and when I looked at that road, I went down it, and there's a property that I believe is 1569, and that has some sheds and buildings in the back, and it seems that the 2 garages that are makeshift that are in the far back on the south side are basically half on the lot line and half on their line.
Correct.
It's going to pose a problem if we sell it off to them.
So it would then become more of a neighbor dispute concern. So then it would be more of a, let's get code compliance involved and ask them to move their property onto their property. All their items, their garages, their sheds, whatever it might be, move that onto your own property. That would not be something that once that vacation occurs, that would be a neighbor dispute of one neighbor's thing is on the other person's lot. But right now it is their shed is on our property currently.
And the person looking to buy the property, they're aware of that?
Yes, they are.
Any other questions for city staff? Okay, we're going to give the applicant a chance to make a statement and present their position. Who will be speaking for the applicant? Are you the only one? Yes. That's going to be speaking? Okay, please come up to the podium. I'm going to swear you in first. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. What I'd like you to do is state your name and your affiliation to this project, and also before you leave the podium, there should be a sign-up sheet there. I'd like you to fill in the information, so for the record, we know who you are and
Sure.
have your information.
My
Thank
name
you.
is
Please.
Joshua Michael Mercado. I'm the owner of 1607 West Beach Road. What else would you like to know? I'm sorry.
That
Yeah.
tells it all.
Okay, so when I purchased the property, one of the reasons why I loved the property was because of the privacy area. I did have privacy and didn't have to see into anybody else's yard and whatnot. A few days after I purchased this property, I was out working, and my daughter gave me a call and said, you know, hey, Dad, there's people that are ripping up the grass out in the yard to the right. And I said, okay. I had to finish up a couple tows, and then I, you know, shot back over there. By the time I got there, the yard and the shrubs and everything were just completely gone. All the grass was ripped up and stuff like that. You know, I went out and confronted the neighbors about it, and like, hey, what's going on? They said, oh, let's put this road here, and, you know, we can kind of use it together, and, you know, this and that, and it's kind of upsetting that I spent so much money on a property and nobody had the decency to come over and kind of, you know, say, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? Speaking with the old owner who had the property, I believe for over 40 years, he was upkeeping that property. He was the one who planted all the plants, you know, in the shrubs and stuff like that, and kept it really nice. He informed me, and unfortunately he has passed away. You know, he informed me that, you know, it has been an issue, you know, with them and stuff like that. And, you know, and I did, you know, reach out. I actually had some code compliance come knocking on my door, asking me why I was doing this, you know, to the yard. And I said, listen, you guys need to go speak next door. I'm not the one who ripped this up and who cut these trees down and everything like that. You guys got to go speak to them next door. I don't know what came from that, but shortly after that, I did reach out to the city. I cannot remember the gentleman's name I was dealing with. Yeah, he has retired since, and we were, you know, was it? No. What was Steve's last name? Saborin? Sabrin, yes, that is correct. I was working with him to kind of get things in line to figure out what I needed to do to try to attempt to get the green space, you know, restored back. And unfortunately, before we were able to continue to go through with it, he unfortunately retired. So then I had reached back out and called because I never received a call back from him. And then I think I got a hold of these ladies here who kind of explained to me the process of doing this. And that's when I kind of started this process. And it's been kind of a lengthy process and stuff like that. But, you know, my plan is to return it back to the green space and replant the shrubs and stuff like that to gain that, you know, that privacy back between the neighbors and me. And like I said, one of the biggest reasons why I bought this property was because of the privacy and because of how beautiful the landscape was with all the trees and shrubs and whatnot. So, I mean, that's kind of why, you know, I'm here. You know, I don't think that there is any sort of deal that can be made between both. You know, I've been getting a lot of complaints from them, you know, and saying that there's dust flying on their cars and stuff like that. And I explained to them, well, I wasn't the one who put the gravel. You know, why are you complaining to me about dust on your cars when I'm not the one who put the gravel? You know, my sons do have some four-wheelers and they ride around in the back and stuff like that. And I'm sure that the dust does that, but they're not the only ones that are using this road that was illegally put in. So like I said, my plan is to get that restored back. Obviously, you know, we're coming up to winter here. I'm not going to be able to do it here within the next couple months, but they did inform me that within 24 months they would like that to be restored back. And I mean, I'm sure you can understand how much money that's going to have to cost me to replant shrubs, remove gravel, have them come and dump, you know, 300 feet of dirt, have somebody come in and power seed that so that, you know, the grass and stuff can grow. I'm sure you know, if you know, with me planting arborvitaes back up there that were removed from there, I mean, they're, you know, $350 per tree. And from the front to the back, I'm thinking I'm probably going to need close to 24 of those to put into there. So doing the math, 350 times, you know, 24 trees, I mean, it's a lot of money. But like I said, my main thing is that, I was never consulted. Nobody came over and knocked on my door and said, hey, neighbor, nice to meet you. We're planning on doing this. It kind of just happened because, Richard Fulton, from my understanding from him and from his family, it was never allowed. They didn't want that to happen. And then taking advantage of something, me moving in 2 or 3 days after, and I have to come home to, this yard that I thought was completely beautiful, completely removed and gone. So, I mean, that's the reason because of this. It has nothing to do with, any kind of rivalry or anything like that. It's just me restoring this back to what it was supposed to be and what it has been for many, many years.
The commissioners have any questions of the petitioner?
Sir, I did make a site visit down there, drove down there, and you do have some very well-maintained property on your side.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, is there anyone else here who would like to speak out in support of this project? Is there anybody here who would like to speak out in opposition to this request?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are you the only one that's going to be speaking, or are there others that may want to join you?
If we need to take it to a further hearing, I represent the adjacent landowners, Kevin McCormick from McCormick Law.
Okay, that is your, let me swear you in first, please.
Of course.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Commissioners.
And please repeat your name again.
Kevin McCormick, McCormick.
Thank you.
Sure. And I represent, there's actually 2 adjoining parcels, the 1569 Beach Road, which is the house to the north and east of the area we're talking about. That's owned by Francisco Ochoa, who's in the red jacket right there. And then to the south and east, vacant parcel there, that's Jose Mendez, who has the hat on, the gray hat. And then actually the subsequently south vacant lot is Jose Mendez Jr., who has the green hat. He owns that lot there. The primary concern that we have with this vacation request is that it's contemplated that the entire area of the right-of-way would be sold to the petitioner, which is in contravention of both the Illinois Municipal Code as well as Waukegan's Municipal Code. Section 1843G mirrors Section 1191-2 of the Municipal Code, which requires in any vacation of a right-of-way a proportionate, that title to a vacated street or an alley be vesting proportionately to all abutting owners. And so I can give you the citation for that. So the issue, first and foremost, is that the proposed plan is to sell the entirety of this right-of-way to Mr. Mercado. I don't see how that can happen because it violates both the municipal code, the Illinois Municipal Code, as well as Waukegan's own municipal code. And we can get into issues as it relates to the particulars of the objections and all that, including the fact that this actually was used as an access road. There's a former municipal bridge that collapsed over the creek, which we can provide evidence of. I'm glad that the city has updated the information relative to the sanitary sewer line that does run through there, because I know the version that I saw that was in the packet didn't have that information. I don't know. My understanding of the parcel is that that sewer line doesn't run along the western border of the right-of-way. I think it kind of runs close to the middle of the parcel that we're talking about, but I don't, obviously that would be an issue to determine as it relates to the easements and things of that nature. So in as much as the application is seeking a full sale of the entire right-of-way to the petitioner, we do object to that. It is contrary to the Illinois Municipal Code as well as to the city's code.
And Mr. McCormick, would you give me that citation again?
Sure. So the citation to the municipal code, to the Illinois Municipal Code, is 65 ILCS 511-91-2.
Thank you.
Yep, and then the Waukegan code, which mirrors that code, is 18-43 subsection G. I could also give you the citation to the Illinois Supreme Court case that affirms that, but I think we're.
If you like.
Sure. So that would be Chavda versus Wolak, CHAVDA versus Wolak, WOLAK. The case citation of that is 188 Illinois 2nd 394.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I don't know if the commissioners have any questions as it relates to that issue.
Commissioner Anderson.
Sure.
But in looking at the maps in the previous presentation, all of those houses have access to a road. And this particular piece of property does have a sewer line. I understand that. If access is given and that is done elsewhere, why is, I don't understand why people want to have this continue to, access to what? It's all wetlands.
So, I appreciate the question, Commissioner. First and foremost, as I said, both the Illinois Municipal Code and the Villages Code, or the City's Code, I apologize, obligate any vacation of a right-of-way to be proportionately distributed to all adjoining landowners. So that's the first issue. That's irrespective of the issue which you're referring to, which is an access issue. And so that access issue relates to a couple of things. Yes, I would agree with you that the parcel, which is 38455 New York Avenue, which we see here is the southern parcel there, that is not, I would agree, that's not a buildable lot because that's in the floodplain. The problem is that the parcel further south of that, which you can see it's a much bigger lot, and about 2/3 of it is in the waterway. But the southern and eastern portion of that lot is actually a buildable lot. Now, I know Commissioner Griffin, you made it a point of saying that sounds like a Beach Park problem. That actually does reside in Beach Park. So that aspect of it is a Beach Park problem, but access to that lot is an issue because it is a buildable lot. So too, I know you had asked the question as it related to the other objectioner. The lot to the east of that, actually half of it is a buildable lot. And so there are concerns, because you can see that the waterway is only on the northern half of that parcel. I don't represent that objectioner, but as it relates to the issue, the southern half of that parcel would be a buildable lot because it falls outside of the waterway and the floodplain.
But looking at the map, there are other houses there and they have access to the south. So I still don't understand. I don't understand the access issue. I understand what you're saying about right of way and the case law that you're citing.
Commissioner Anderson, I'm not sure if you're being picked up, your voice is being picked up. Would you please use the microphone?
So sorry. Okay, let me try again. The property to the south, there are already properties there, but there is access there that has nothing to do with the property that is being requested to be vacated. And I understand the case law that you just cited, so that's something separate. But, you know, this isn't, in everything that's been presented, this is not an access issue for property owners here? Other than maybe the two pieces of property, or the two sheds, or whatever those are, that are partially on what's being requested to be vacated?
I'd like to add something to that. As far as access is concerned, this is not currently an access road. It's a property owned by Waukegan. So this property that you're referring to currently does not have legal access anyway at this point in time, because this space is a Waukegan-owned property, and it's been illegally used as access right now. So there currently isn't access. I'm not sure how this being vacated to the neighbor to the west changes legally any status of these properties here.
And I appreciate the concern, Commissioner. And as I stated, I would agree that with the initial parcel, which is the 38,455, Mr. Jose Mendez Sr. does own both of those parcels, and so therefore he has access to them. The parcel to the further south is owned by a completely different owner. And access has been acquired and has been consistently maintained through that right-of-way. There is a municipal bridge that was there that collapsed. There has been a bridge over that waterway to connect the right-of-way to that parcel, and that has historically been there. And so as it relates to that, I wasn't around before the records that were shown from 1961, so I can't say what the property was or how it was constructed up until that point. But
Well, how was that property owner accessing that property prior to the gravel being put in there? When it was trees and shrubs, how was that property owner accessing that property?
this through the right-of-way.
But they'd have to cross the wetlands, right?
To the southern portion of that right-of-way? Is that what?
Yeah, that's what you're basically saying, for a bridge that no longer exists, going across a bridge that no longer exists, correct?
No, a bridge currently does exist there. There was a...
Failed, it's not there.
No, there is evidence of a municipal bridge that has collapsed.
Okay, so it's not there.
Portion of the bridge
And
is
that
still there.
property south, that's not their property, right?
No, that is their property. That's
Oh, that
Mr.
is their property, okay.
Jose Mendez Jr., who's
So,
sitting right there.
No, I don't know
It's
what the
okay.
city would do, but I don't think that if you bought that property and wanted to build it, I don't think the city is obligated to build a road to get access to that property, are they?
Property is in Beach Park, so that would be Beach Park's responsibility to provide access, and that access would come from New York Avenue on the south.
Okay, so the access issue, I'm not buying the access issue, I'm sorry. It just doesn't resonate with me. The proportional division of the easement, which are, I'm not a lawyer, which you were citing a case or whatever that says that. I mean, I would agree with that. Have they requested their half of the easement?
There's no obligation under the municipal code or under the city's code as it relates to that.
So
All
you're
it
okay with
requires,
giving half of the easement to the gentleman who's put the petition in because he's proportionally, and he's going to get half the gravel road and you're going to get half the gravel road that's totally unusable, and you're okay with that, according to the law?
that would be correct.
Okay, so you're
Correct.
arguing about half the easement.
No,
Totally unusable because you've only got half an easement because you can't put a road in there, right?
no, the primary objection, as I stated before, was that the proposal that is being supported by staff is for 100% of this right-of-way.
I understand, but if you
Sure.
came back and said, I want half the easement, you'd be fine with that.
Certainly, yes. If we...
So your client would end up with half an easement that's totally unusable.
Well, does your client
Well-
want half of an easement, and
I mean,
are they willing to pay?
If he doesn't take the entire easement, are they going to take that easement, or are they just going to let it sit there and let it be city property?
No, my clients would be more than happy to accept their proportionate half of the easement. Because it is two separate landowners between the parcel that has the house on it and the one before, it would have to be split up amongst, we would have to have 3 deeds that would come out of it, but that would be the only concern. But for the issue as it relates to the sanitary sewer easement and where it falls within, between those parcels. So my understanding is that it kind of goes right along the middle of it, but I think we'd have to, be more precise as to.
See, and I'm going to be really frank. I'm going to say something that's really apolitical. I don't think your clients did a very nice thing to this gentleman here who bought the property. I would be very upset too if somebody all of a sudden came into an easement adjacent property that was nicely vegetated and nicely planted and started tearing things up with not even talking to me. So I understand that you're saying potentially, we're not following the law and the letter of the law, and maybe we can't approve it because we're not following the letter of the law. But the reality is, in the end, he can still come back and ask for half the easement, and then your clients are going to end up with half an easement that's totally unusable. So, and my question is, are they going to come back and actually want that half an easement? Because I'm going to be really upset if we make this gentleman over here go back and come back with a half an easement, and then you guys let it sit with gravel on it the way it is now.
You're correct. My clients will have no problem in acquiring their half. The procedure, as I understand it, any party who is an adjacent landowner, it doesn't require all parties, it's any party who's an adjacent landowner would make the vacation request. The power of the commission and then of the full city board as far as vesting title to that vacated right-of-way is a separate function. So the request for the vacation is saying this is city property, we want to return the city property into private hands, and following both the statute as well as the city code, that is where you would vest it proportionally to the parties. So I don't believe that actually a new application needs to be submitted or anything else along those lines. So we could push that forward because the request is to have it vacated. The function of proportionately vesting title in that would be a secondary step. So I don't think we need to make the applicant redo anything at this point. We can simply push that forward and proportionately distribute the property.
Your clients have not made an application to vacate their half of the easement, right?
Commissioner, that's the point I'm saying. It does, the statute, neither the Illinois Municipal Code or the city's code obligates multiple applications. Any adjoining owner can make the application for all adjoining owners. One application is all that's necessary. A separate application isn't necessary for each adjacent owner. It's once the property is vacated, it no longer is city property, then the second step is to vest title to it proportionately to each owner.
Yeah, but my understanding is that they have to purchase that property. So you're saying
That's correct.
that he would get the vacation, but they would get half the property? That doesn't seem right to me. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, vacation is just a procedural step.
Right. But there's compensation related to that step.
Correct, and it requires an ordinance in order to vacate city property, an ordinance has to be passed. And that ordinance would identify that pursuant to the city code as well as to the municipal code, that parcel, and it would be defined of whatever it is vacated and is no longer city property, and therefore there would be a deed granted from the city to the adjoining property owners, giving them title to whatever right-of-way area would be vacated. So the vacation part that's a procedural aspect of it.
I guess my question to our attorney is, are we breaking law if we approve his request for vacation based on what he's telling us?
So as I reviewed the citations provided by Mr. McCormick, I do see the proportionality language. And so from what I can see, if we approve, what we would need to do if approval was granted would be to approve a plat of vacation, which is in our packet. The plat of vacation, we would be recommending approval of plat of vacation, pardon me. The plat of vacation contemplates the vacation of the entirety of the right-of-way. And so approving that approves the entire right-of-way. If we're only approving half of it, if we're doing it according to proportion, I believe, and please, Noel, staff, let me know if I'm wrong, a new plat of vacation would need to be made taking into consideration only half of the right-of-way.
That's correct, and the cost for the original plat of vacation has been borne by the petitioner.
And so in that case, if we were to recommend approval of a vacation between now and the final approval between City Council and the Community Development Committee, the petitioner would have an opportunity to reconfigure the plat of vacation for half of the right-of-way. And I would recommend before we discuss this among, before the commission discusses this among itself, getting some direction or some feedback from the petitioner as to whether he would be willing to do this.
We are not at that point yet.
So I'm going to go back to my original questions. We cannot approve what he's requesting, which is the full vacation and giving him that property for the amount that's been stated. Is that correct, based on what you just said?
Based on what I've read, yes, there's a proportionality requirement.
So I guess, we have no alternative but to hold it over, right? Because he has to redo his application for half the vacation.
Well, what I could recommend, and it really depends on how long it takes to reconfigure the plat of vacation, is recommend vacation of the right-of-way. And then by the time it is before the Community Development Committee and City Council, they would be approving a plat of vacation that has been updated to reflect half of the right-of-way.
But that's his requirement to do it.
Correct.
So I guess the question is, are you willing to do that?
I'm sticking with the full.
And before,
Like they said that there was no legal right of way from the beginning. They have.
Could you go to the microphone, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
while he's walking to the microphone, let me also put a question out there that you can think about answering, Mr. McCormick, for your clients.
Sure.
If this gentleman, Mr. Menendez, Menendez?
Mercado.
Mercado, I
Yes,
apologize. Even if he was willing to reduce his request to be half of it, which he doesn't seem to be willing to do, and he gets that request, your clients could just continue to use the property as they have for no cost, as they have right now. While he's going through the right channels, taking the steps to take care of the property, which he did not usurp, your clients would have the opportunity to continue to usurp that property as they have right now without paying any kind of money for that property, as this gentleman is willing to do by following the rules. Just putting that out there as food for thought.
So, on my behalf, there is access to those south properties from their properties. If you look through them, they did put up some fencing in the back that obviously did not have permits as well. Going through their driveway on each three of those properties that belong to Gabriel, Ochoa, and Mendez and Marta Mendez, all of those properties to the south are accessible from their driveways through their backyard. So if they wanted to have access from them, why don't they just go and put in a permit to put in a road from their driveway to get to those back accesses? With them being that they are wetland, and even if we did do a half vacation on this, I would plant trees all the way up to my very specific point of where I purchased this property. And even between there, what are they going to do? There's no way to drive back there. Are they going to rip up their driveway to put, this driveway over here more and then I have to go after them for, to have all this gravel removed and stuff like that, when they can just use their driveway and go through the proper channels, like you said, to, make this driveway from their properties to their south, which is accessible anyways, the same way that they're accessible now. So this is my thing. My thing is I spent a lot of money on this property because of how beautiful it was. And for me to have to come in 3 days after I spent over $300,000 on this property to see that all this is torn up, and I'm not trying to talk down about anybody, but looking out of my kitchen window when I'm having my morning coffee out and seeing sheds that are falling apart, fences that are falling apart, that are falling down on that were not even put up with a permit. Why should I have to do that when I can plant those trees and bring that green space back to how it was originally for the past 40 plus years, dating back to the 1960s? Regardless, even if this is vacated fully, to me, they have access to any of their properties from their properties up in the front. As long as they go through the right channels and get the permits to do so. All this stuff was done without permits. All the trees that were cut down there were done without permits. So why should I have to go and pull permits and call, the public works when I have a tree that the wind snapped down? Why should I have to call them and get permits to have a company come out and charge me $8,000 to remove these trees? But nobody else does. Everybody else can just come and cut down as they will and ruin what has been for 40 plus years. I just don't understand that. I don't think that me taking this right away is going to do anything. I think it's just, and excuse me, I don't know how to put this in better terms, but who's bigger than the next person? And it's not about that. It's about me returning the space back to what it was when I purchased this property and then I paid for. Even though at the time it wasn't considered my property, because it is considered the city's property, the owner who had this house for over 40 years maintained that property. And it should have continued to been maintained after I purchased it, which I intended to do. And this is my thing. If it's going to cost me $35,680 to remove this gravel and plant all these trees and shrubs again, that's on me. So if I have to split this with half, then, maybe I need to get my attorneys involved as well and go after these people for half of this money that it's going to cost me to restore it back to what it was.
Noel, did the neighbors violate any city ordinances by tearing down the trees and putting in the road? I mean, don't they need to get some sort of a permit to get access off of, Beach Park Road? I mean, it seems like they've just decided to have their own little access and their own little drive with the gravel road.
So generally speaking, I don't have personal knowledge of who did any of that, but the city does require tree removal permits, and we do not allow gravel driveways.
Who put in a gravel driveway?
I don't know who did it, but it's there.
Noel, if I could just ask you one question. Is it Waukegan's position that the road would be removed regardless of where it stands right now?
Correct. The gravel would not be allowed to remain regardless of who the owner is. And if the city maintained ownership, we would remove the gravel at some point and prohibit access for vehicles because it was never an improved right-of-way. It's not a right-of-way that we intend to have as a road or to maintain as a public road. So we would restore it to grass and trees and bushes and presumably block access to it.
And the shed buildings that are encroaching on the city's property, what would be happening to those?
We would ask code enforcement to cite the owner of those buildings and have them removed.
I hate to be, so blunt about it, but, if you're not willing to take half, there's not much we can do, really.
No, I understand, but I mean, either way, I completely understand.
Here, you're trying to restore it to a nice environment, so they have
Right.
I get it, get it, but.
So it's either I'm going to restore it or the city's going to restore it. And like they said, they're going to block access from anything to be driven up in there anyways. And the grass is going to be replanted. And, I definitely will, at least on whatever part that I can, plant trees and shrubs as well.
I would suggest you be a good citizen of Waukegan and donate the trees to the city so that they can do it and maybe do it at your
Maybe I
cost.
definitely
And
could definitely do that.
People let you do that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you guys would allow me, I would like to do that up to the point to where I can.
I would suggest you talk to Public Works.
All right. So I actually have been talking, they actually stopped by the house a couple days and we actually spoke about it, so.
So you are not willing to take half, and I'm not criticizing, I just want to clarify, it's all or nothing in your mind.
At this point, yes, because I just don't feel, even if I took half, what's the point? It can't be driven on. You know, the gravel has to be removed anyways. So it's either, and like I said, I'm not trying to be, you know, I went through the proper channels. I didn't want to argue with people. I didn't want to yell at people, start fights with people. I did it the right way. And I feel that even if it's sold to me and I do exactly what you guys are going to do, I mean, what's the difference? There's no cars that are going to be able to be driven on there. Even if I provide this, you know, the public works with all these trees and I bring them in there and they plant them there, what's the difference? The grass and the trees are going to be replanted back, whether it comes out of my pocket or it comes out of the city's pocket. You know, but I'm here stating that I have no problem paying that money to have it restored back to what it is.
So if we choose not to allow this at this time, my suggestion, besides talking to Public Works,
Correct.
contact your alderman.
Okay, sounds good.
How do we deal with this? Do we just not vote on it, or do we say continuance, or what do we do? I mean, we can't approve it, right?
Well, this commission doesn't have final approval, and so it would be a recommendation to deny, or it would be a recommendation to approve. And as with any recommendation, city council will make the determination that it wants to make.
Well, and I guess if we do approve it, then that still leaves you open. If you,
The other option there is that the petitioner could withdraw the application. That's the remaining option, in my opinion, unless you disagree, council.
I don't disagree with that. In fact, if we were to continue this for a month, the petitioner could withdraw it at any time, so long as we met the notice requirements of the Open Meetings Act.
That's true. If it were continued to the next meeting, then the petitioner could assess his options and make a decision whether he wanted to move forward or withdraw the application.
And sir, I definitely would recommend that you do talk to code enforcement as far as, because it looks like it's a storage yard back there. I mean, there's timbers back there by the
So code enforcement I'm sorry to cut you off. Code enforcement has came and spoke to me about it. And I did state how I felt about it. They said that they were starting an investigation with the trees that were cut down and whatnot and everything else. I mean, they've been going up and down this street for the past 3 weeks. A couple times they stopped to me and asked me questions, you know, about stuff, and, you know, I explained to them how I felt about it. So they have been obviously in and up and down the street. You know, when this originally happened as well, code enforcement and some sort of the city council came knocking on my door, asking me why I put the road there. And I explained to them, I didn't put the road there. You guys got to go talk to the next door neighbors. So I don't know what came to that, but at that time, you know, they did see that trees were cut down, brushes were cut down, and Rock Road was put down illegal without a permit. So they have been coming back and forth and speaking, and I guess doing whatever it is that they need to do to move forward on this.
Well, I think it's important that we do this correctly, because it's getting
You have to hold it down while you speak.
You can move it closer to you, though, if you want.
My point is, and I think you can hear me.
I can hear you.
It's getting more and more difficult to do business in Waukegan.
I know. I understand. It is.
And
It
it's,
is.
with code enforcement and the building department, it's getting harder and harder and harder.
Yes.
So we want to do the right thing, and we want to treat our citizens properly. You are trying to do the right thing.
Understand. That is correct.
And let's hold it over until the next meeting and do this properly.
I'd like to ask our attorney, if we do vote to hold this over at the next meeting, what can we expect that will be accomplished in that time?
Well, a few things can happen. The petitioner can determine whether half of the vacation is acceptable. the petitioner can withdraw the petition, and then whatever enforcement action the city wishes to take, it sounds like it's already underway. The petitioner can go forward. We can make a recommendation as to a vacation, but ultimately, as far as I read the law that council has pointed out tonight, the city is limited in what it can vacate. It'll vacate according to the proportions of the abutting neighbors, and so, assuming we recommend, and assuming that the city council approves within its powers, then that approval goes towards half of the right-of-way. So those are the three scenarios if we continue this to the December date.
And I have one more question as well. So even if we were to agree on half of the right-of-way, all the gravel would be removed and green area would be restored back into place, correct?
So my understanding is that as part of this vacation, the requirement is that your vacated portions would be remediated at your expense. The remaining unvacated portions would remain city right-of-way, in which case any removal would be at the city's expense.
And does the city have plans on removing that gravel and stuff like that and replanting the grass and shrubs and stuff as well?
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, I just,
We would have to make plans for that and
Right,
budget
no,
for
I
that
understand.
because we didn't anticipate that it would be there. So it's not
Right.
planned to have to do that.
right.
And I just want to be clear, there's no time frame on when the city would do that. I don't want to make it seem like.
No, I understand. I understand. But on my half, I would have 24 months to get my side up to where it's feasible, correct?
That is
And it
correct.
would never be an access road to any properties to the south or have any sort of vehicles that could be driven up and down there and used as a road, correct?
Correct.
And if it's vacated and by default, the city would be giving proportionally shares to the adjoining properties, correct?
No, not by default.
It would remain the city property, okay.
Correct.
Okay,
And so theoretically, you have a smaller piece that then you could divide proportionately between the landowners again at another date. I mean, theoretically, this could go on and on and on.
Correct.
It would just never reach zero. There would be inches of.
It's crazy. It is not how, I understand that there's a law, but it just doesn't make any sense. Particularly when that property has been there for 40 years, and all of a sudden, whomever decides to gravel it over, cut the trees, and make a driveway.
Okay, a couple of items. First of all, if the city were to decide to split the vacation between the two parties, three parties, then we would have to know, the city would have to know that the other parties would be willing to abide by the conditions that are set and also be willing to pay the amount of the compensation to the city, okay? So they would have to be given this dollar figure, and we would have to know, or the city would have to know that they accept the terms. That's one thing. Secondly, from the standpoint of benefit to the city, if the property is vacated, there would be a tax element involved. There would be a real estate tax attached to the properties, and that would put these properties back on the public tax rolls.
So if I may address the first portion, Chairman, you're correct. A portion of the right-of-way would be returned to tax rolls. As to the first statement, which is beginning to escape me as I talk,
They would not have.
The
to
sharing of the
purchase
expenses.
app.
oh yeah, it remains with the city of, right, an interest, but there's no obligation. It just remains city right-of-way. And there is no way to hold a non-applicant, a non-petitioner to the conditions that are being placed upon the petitioner, because in this is an understanding between the petitioner and the city. And so if there is, if the condition is to remove the gravel, and we then ask the neighbor, the objector, to remove the gravel as part of this, if that's where you were going.
Well, there are several options. I mean, it could be vacated with equal portions going to all the parties, or proportionate portions going to all the parties. It could be vacated with Mr. Mercado agreeing to purchase his portion of it, and the other parties agreeing to purchase their portions. It could be vacated with Mr. Mercado agreeing to purchase his portion and the objectors not agreeing to purchase their portion, in which case that would remain the property of the city. Is that correct? So they have all those different possibilities.
Correct. And as Commissioner Anderson stated, as far as I can see, there's nothing that would stop Mr. Mercado from submitting another petition for a vacation for the remaining right-of-way, at which point the remaining right-of-way is smaller and, subject to less contribution. That's what it's
Until they
called
end
in
up
the
with a
ordinance.
foot of right-of-way, right?
Until
Never
there's a
ends.
foot of right-of-way.
You want to go through that every year? Come up with another vacation?
I could take it as far as you want. So I have a question. With doing some research on my own and speaking with my attorney's office as well, this road, how long has this road been there on this property? How long has that easement been there? Can you date this back to how many years ago?
In terms of the platting, that's like very old. I know I've seen some documents from objectors and as well as you of some original plats, and they are very old. That right-of-way has been platted for a long time. It has never been a road, however. And in terms of aerial imagery, I have aerial imagery from 1939, I believe, is the oldest, and in all of those years, it has never been a road until between 2020 and 2022 when that illegal gravel was placed down.
So what was this road designed for? Was this designed for the west side portion of the Calmarian Gardens?
That I can't speak to. I do not know the intent behind how
Okay.
the parcels were divided.
Okay.
Being as there's a sewer line there, it may have been platted simply as a utility easement and never intended to be an access.
Okay. So strictly just to get down to the sewer lines and stuff? Correct.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case,
Okay.
based on the current conditions of the property,
Okay.
that was the original intention.
Okay.
In the interest of moving this along, what do you want to do?
I would definitely like to continue it. I'd like to speak with my attorney's office and continue to speak with planning and zoning, because if I do agree to purchase half of this property and the objectors do not agree to the other to purchase the other piece of this property, I can go and create another plat and put in another application for this other piece of property, like you said, until there is really nothing left. And I mean,
Unless they choose to come and actually, go
Right.
to the bar and buy the other half and put in
Right.
their part, which they're entitled to do, so.
correct, which turns it back to green space and shrubbery and
Right,
and
exactly.
trees anyways.
They're going to have to follow the same rules that the city is applying to you. In 24 months, that gravel's got to be gone, and you
Correct.
the fun stuff, so.
Well,
Yeah,
And like you said, sir, it can't be a road.
Right.
It can't be an access point.
right. So I don't understand what we're sitting here arguing and fighting about.
exactly. Let's get it done, okay?
So, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was just saying, I mean, I would like to pursue, but like I said, I mean, if we can have a continuance so I can, get with my attorney's office as well and continue to speak with planning and zoning. My plan probably would be to continue to go through this, and even if it comes down to me purchasing half of this property, that's what I'll do. And if they don't purchase the other half, then I'll put in another application for the other portion.
You have all the investment in it.
Correct.
I'd like to ask if the objectors would like to have an opportunity for rebuttal.
I would, and I know that there are some questions that have been
I'm going to go ahead and sit back down. Thank you.
Thank
tentatively
you, Mr.
asked of me,
McConnell.
so I want to address those for the commissioners as well. One of the issues that is open, and I think is something that perhaps continuing this would make sense, is I actually interpret the city code slightly differently because of the fact that
The vacation request, it's actually a two-step process that is contemplated by the city code and by the Illinois Municipal Code as it relates to vacating rights of way. And so that issue, the process is initiated by a vacation application, which is what Mr. Mercado has done. But the process of passing the ordinance, which then divvies up whatever the vacated right-of-way, is a secondary step once the vacation application has been approved or moved up to the full city. So, and that's specifically 1843C of the city's code, which refers to passing the ordinance, and then thereafter, which is where you then get into subsection G of 1843, that is a separate step in the process in which the parcel itself that has been vacated is then proportionately deeded to all of the adjoining landowners. What, as I understand it, under subsection C, which is, Chairman, you had asked the question as it relates to putting in the condition of a payment. That's where it says that the ordinance may provide that it will not become effective until any of the owners actually make the payment that is called for by the approved vacation. So as it relates to this, there's an assessed value that has been given to the entire parcel. I want to say the recommended value was $3,600, something like that. And so that would be what would be passed as far as the entire vacated right-of-way. Subsequent to that is where you deal with the proportionate distribution of that vacated right-of-way. So I see it as a two-step process. So I don't know if, as we sit here today, that the application, because the application that is presented by Mr. Mercado is simply to have that right-of-way vacated. I believe there is a secondary step that then would occur after the vacation would be accepted, in which the distribution would occur. There is an obligation to make a payment to the city in order to acquire title. So, and I would say that I would submit to all of you commissioners that if we do continue it, I can of course speak with Mr. Mercado tonight, and subsequent to that, I can speak with City Council as far as how we could best organize that to make this as painless of a process. I agree, it's absurd to present to him this infinite request to keep inching eastward, and I don't think that's within anybody's interest to do that. And I know in speaking with my clients, they would have every interest in acquiring their half of the right-of-way. And so I think, as I sit here today, that seems to be the most prudent approach. It's to no prejudice to Mr. Mercado, and it allows the department to also get involved as far as what else would need to be done as it relates to making sure everything was done. That's just my opinion, reading everything that's been discussed today. Obviously, there's an interest by Mr. Mercado to acquire some. There's an interest by my clients for acquisition, and that would just seem to be the fair approach.
Thank you. Mr. Mercado, you are entitled to the final statement. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, like I said, I just would like to continue this because I am going to continue to pursue it.
Okay. Then in this case, I would like to make a motion to continue. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Based on the information that's been provided, I make a motion for continuance of this motion. Yep.
I'll second that.
Do we have any further discussion on this motion?
Just to be clear, this is to a date certain?
Yes, to the
December
next.
14th, this room, this time, 7 o'clock, no further notice.
Should we state a purpose for continuing it?
We don't have to.
Okay, thank you. So a motion is made and seconded to continue this matter to the next scheduled, to the December Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Any further discussion on this? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Anderson? Bill,
Yes.
Griffin, Grimes, Haug,
Yes.
Haynes,
Yes.
Rivera,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes, motion carries. We'll see you next month.
Whose job is it to collect the sheet? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on. Sure.
Next item, item 5 item B under new business number 5 is rules of procedure for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Who is going to lead this discussion? Would that be our attorney?
Thank you, Chair. So the proposed rules of procedure are exactly how you saw from last month, with some cleanup in terms of updating gendered language, getting rid of redundancies such as Section 2 and Article 1, where we have financial interests, which are talked about later on in this article, in this rules of procedure. The Commissioner Haynes just brought up a point here in section, I think it's 4. Oh, I'm sorry, Article 4, Section 2. Planning and Zoning Commission members are crossed out in terms of requesting a continuance. And the idea here is that this commission, just like any subsidiary body, may move to continue its items on its agenda. And so it's not a request per se, but a movement by the entire body. And so if a member makes a motion, it's not a request, it's a motion, and the commission approves it, then that is how the commission determines a continuance. Continuances here in Article 4, Section 2 are more about requests by staff, by petitioners, and interested parties, which can be an objector, an adjacent neighbor, a supporter, theoretically. Are there any other questions on the proposed changes?
I have one other, right above that in section 1, there's a list of how the meeting shall proceed ordinarily, and I know that we have had previously, after item number 3, approval of minutes of the previous meeting, Chairman has asked for audience time in general. I don't see that in there anymore. Are we going to remove that audience time in general and only limit it to old business and new business?
Perhaps that needs to be added. This is exactly how our rules of procedure are written, and general audience time can be added in between 6 and 7, or in addition to written communications. The idea then can be written communications or other audience participation generally.
Council, we've been having audience time, general audience time early in the agenda, much like the city council agenda. And I think that we probably missed it because the original rules of procedure predate the Open Meetings Act language about audience time and all of that. I think it's an excellent catch, and I would suggest that we put it after number 3 as the new number 4 and adjust accordingly. Pardon me?
I said, how did we miss that?
We don't usually have a lot of audience time for general audience time, but I do agree that it belongs there and belongs
But
probably
if we
at the
miss
beginning of
it, we're in trouble.
That's for sure. Somebody will tell us we missed it.
Then we have to go back through all the years and have audience time for all those.
I just want to make a comment about this. This was a pretty big undertaking. I know it's a short document, but there's a lot involved here, and it took a lot of thought and a lot of effort, and I just want to thank our corporate attorney, and city staff for all the work that they did to put this together, and I think it's an excellent document. And I would like to ask for a motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the rules of procedure for the Planning and Zoning Commission as presented.
I second it.
With the amendment?
With
add
the
audience time?
amendment of adding
With the
audience.
audience amendment, yes.
Okay,
And
motion
I
by
second it.
Commissioner Anderson, and Commissioner Haynes seconds that motion with the addition of the audience time to the meeting agenda. Right, okay. Any discussion on this motion?
I just want to say, I want to echo what you just said in terms of this process and how smooth it was. And you've distilled a lot of information into a small document, which is really nice for us.
Any other comments or discussion on this motion? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Anderson? Yes. Bill?
Yes.
Griffin? Grimes?
Yes.
Haug?
Yes.
Haynes?
Yes.
Rivera?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Item 6, discussion. Is there anything that we need to discuss?
Chairman, I have one suggestion, and that's at the last meeting, we were asked to change how we made motions for approval. And I'm just wondering if I know this is stupid, maybe it's just an old lady, but would it be possible to have a cheat sheet that says, this is how you make this kind of motion? I think that would be helpful, so we're not looking quite as, or I'm not looking quite as incompetent. I'd like to have something in front of me that I could use.
Teddy, you never look incompetent.
I echo that, and I can provide guidance in written form on the crafting of motions.
I almost brought my minutes from last time because I had written it, but could I find them? No.
Teddy, I do that every time. I always have my notes in front of me. Any other discussion?
If I may add one thing, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
please.
Before this meeting tonight, we had a meeting, public meeting on the benefit of trees with speakers from the Morton Arboretum. Thank you to those of you who were here for that, and to those of you who missed it, please watch it on our YouTube channel. It was a great presentation.
Okay, thank you. And before we adjourn, I would just like to thank Alderman Florian for being here with us. She's very consistent, very concerned about what's going on in the city, and I can't remember a meeting she's missed. And also thank you to our law enforcement officers in the back to keep us safe. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Commissioner Haug,
Second.
second by Commissioner Anderson. All in favor?
Yay.
Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned at
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
8:25. Happy